Hey hunters! Welcome back to Anime Fanfic Corner, the only place on YouTube dedicated exclusively to Hunter x Hunter audiobooks. Today we're diving into another amazing fanfic. Reincarnated as young king of Meteor City, Meruem-HxH. Big shout out to the original author, their info's in the description, so definitely check them out and show some love. If you're new here and love HxH as much as I do, just say hi in the comments. Hit that like button, smash subscribe, and officially become an hunter. To keep things immersive, I only do intros and outros at the start and end of playlists, so you can enjoy the story with no interruptions. Also, don't sleep on the community tab. I actually post stuff there, not just sub-begging like certain audiobook channels. Embarrassed smiley face emoji. Alright, let's get into it. Peace. Love you all. Headphone emoji. Blue heart emoji. Chapter 1. In the heart of Meteor City, a place shrouded in darkness and despair, the cries of a newborn echoed through the filthy alleyways. Meteor City was a lawless and chaotic settlement, home to outcasts, criminals, and the forgotten. The city was a massive landfill, filled with towering mounds of garbage and debris that stretched as far as the eye could see. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the sky was perpetually overcast, casting a gloomy shadow over the city's inhabitants. Among the piles of trash, a small, dirty blanket barely concealed a newborn child, Haruto, who had been cruelly discarded like the waste surrounding him. His dark green hair was matted and sticky with filth, and his purple eyes were filled with tears as he cried out for help, completely unaware of his past life as Meruem, the powerful Chimera Ant King. As his cries grew louder, a curious 3-year-old boy named Phaeton stumbled upon the discarded infant. Phaeton, himself an orphan in Meteor City, was no stranger to adversity. Though he was still a toddler, his deep gray eyes held a wisdom beyond his years. Phaeton carefully approached the crying baby, his small hands reaching out to pull back the soiled blanket. Upon seeing Haruto's tear-streaked face, Phaeton felt an immediate connection with the abandoned child. He carefully picked up Haruto, cradling him in his arms as he walked back to the makeshift shelter he called home. Unbeknownst to Phaeton, this simple act of kindness would forever change the course of both their lives. Skip to a few years later, where Haruto is 5 years old and Phaeton is 8. The two boys had grown closer over the years, with Phaeton becoming increasingly protective of his younger brother. Haruto had started to display the haughty and arrogant traits reminiscent of his past life as Meruem, while Phaeton's ruthless and cold nature began to take form. In the dimly lit confines of their makeshift shelter, the two brothers were huddled together, their stomachs growling with hunger. "I'm tired of this," Haruto declared, clenching his small fists. "We deserve better than this. Better than scavenging for scraps like rats." Phaeton nodded in agreement, his face hidden beneath the shadow of his hood. "You're right. But what can we do?" Haruto's purple eyes glinted with determination. "We take what we want. There's a horde lord in this part of Meteor City who's been collecting food and supplies for himself. It's time we relieve him of his riches." Phaeton's gray eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. "It's dangerous, but if we're careful and quick, we can pull it off." Haruto smirked. "Of course we can. We're destined for greatness, after all. Now, let's go." The two boys set out, moving stealthily through the labyrinthine alleyways of Meteor City. The stench of garbage and decay filled the air, but the brothers paid it no mind. Their focus was solely on their target. As they approached the Horde Lord's hideout, they observed the area, taking note of the guards and possible entry points. The building was decrepit, with boarded-up windows and a rusty metal door. A few guards armed with makeshift weapons patrolled the perimeter, their faces scarred and worn from years of living in Meteor City. Phaeton leaned in close to Haruto, whispering their plan. "We'll wait until the guards change shifts. That's when they're most vulnerable. You sneak in through the back, and I'll create a distraction out front." Haruto nodded, a confident grin on his face. Piece of cake. They waited patiently, watching as the guards eventually changed shifts. As one group left their posts and another took their place, the brothers sprang into action. Phaeton moved towards the front of the building, making noise and drawing the attention of the guards. As they chased after him, Haruto darted into the shadows, sneaking towards the rear entrance. Haruto silently picked the lock, his nimble fingers working deftly to open the door. Once inside, he quickly scanned the room, spotting crates filled with food and supplies. Haruto smirked, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Phaeton gritted his teeth, cursing under his breath as he clashed with the guards. The more he was hit, the angrier he became. His breathing grew heavy, and the rage inside him threatened to boil over. "You filthy bastards!" he growled, spitting blood from his mouth as he parried a blow from a guard's crude weapon. "You think you can just hoard everything for yourselves while the rest of us suffer, huh?" The guards sneered at Phaeton, clearly unfazed by his outburst. They continued to press their attack, landing blows on the young boy as he did his best to defend himself. Phaeton's anger grew with each strike, fueling his determination to protect Haruto and take what they needed from the Horde Lord. His body was battered and bruised, but his spirit remained unbroken. As Phaeton continued to fend off the guards, his thoughts briefly turned to Haruto. He trusted his little brother to complete their mission, but he couldn't help but worry about his safety. Shaking off his concern, he refocused on the battle at hand, knowing that their success hinged on his ability to hold off the guards. The guards, seeing Phaeton's resilience, began to grow frustrated. They intensified their assault, their blows becoming more vicious and desperate. Just as Phaeton was about to be overwhelmed, a blur of blonde hair and swift movements appeared beside him. A boy, only a year older than Phaeton, fought alongside him, expertly striking down the guards with swift, powerful attacks. "Who the hell are you?" Phaeton demanded, his voice strained from exertion and pain. The newcomer smirked, his blue eyes flashing with amusement. "The name's Sphinx," he replied, landing a powerful punch on the guard's jaw. "I've been watching you two for a while now. You're pretty reckless, but I like your style." Phaeton grunted, not particularly interested in pleasantries. He was more concerned with holding off the guards so Haruto could finish their mission. However, he couldn't deny that Sphinx's assistance was welcome. As they continued to fight, Phaeton's injuries only worsened, but the rage inside him grew stronger. The pain he experienced fueled his anger, which in turn fed his determination to protect Haruto and take what they needed from the Horde Lord. Meanwhile, Haruto worked quickly, grabbing as many supplies as he could carry. His heart raced with excitement, and he could feel the power coursing through his veins, reminding him of his true potential. He couldn't help but think about the kingdom that awaited him, the greatness that was his birthright. As he stuffed food and other necessities into a stolen bag, he heard a commotion outside. His first thought was of Phaeton, and he couldn't help but feel a twinge of worry. He knew his brother was strong, but the odds were stacked against him. Haruto glanced towards the door, hesitating for a moment. He was torn between completing their mission and rushing to Phaeton's aid. As the sounds of fighting grew louder, he made up his mind. He slung the bag of supplies over his shoulder and darted towards the door, intent on helping his first loyal follower on his ascent to top of the world. Haruto burst through the door, his eyes quickly scanning the scene before him. Phaeton and the newcomer, Sphinx, were fighting off the guards, but it was clear that Phaeton was struggling. His body was battered and bruised, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Without hesitation, Haruto charged towards the fray, his small hands balling into fists. "Phaeton," he shouted, his voice filled with concern and determination. "Don't you dare to hurt my people." Phaeton glanced over at Haruto, a mixture of relief and worry flashing across his face. "Stay back, Haruto. It's too dangerous." But Haruto was already in motion, using his quick reflexes and agility to land a series of swift blows on the guards. Together, the three boys managed to drive back their assailants, creating an opening for them to escape. As they sprinted away from the Horde Lord's hideout, Sphinx fell into step beside Haruto and Phaeton, a cocky grin on his face. "You guys are a lot of fun," he said, smirking. "I think I'll hang around for a while. You look like you could use my help." Haruto and Phaeton exchanged a glance before coming to a sudden halt, both turning to face Finks with suspicion in their eyes. Haruto's purple eyes bore into Finks, his voice carrying the weight of a king. "We don't need charity. Tell me, Finks, what are your goals? Your ambitions?" Phaeton's cold gray eyes narrowed, scrutinizing Finks as he awaited his answer. "We have no time for those with meager aspirations. Our path is one of greatness." Finks raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the brother's intense determination. "My goals?" He paused for a moment, considering his answer. "I want to become the strongest fighter in the world. I won't stop until I've reached the pinnacle of power." Haruto and Phaeton exchanged another glance, seemingly satisfied with Finks's response. "Very well," Haruto said, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You may join us. But know this, we are destined for greatness, and we will not tolerate anything less than complete loyalty and dedication." Finks nodded, his blue eyes gleaming with excitement. "You've got it, boss." With their newfound ally in tow, Haruto, Phaeton, and Finks made their way back to the brothers' makeshift base to gather their belongings. They knew that after their fight with the horrid Lord's guards, they couldn't afford to stay in one place for long. The risk of being recognized and hunted down was too great. Chapter 2. As they gathered their meager possessions, Haruto turned to Finks, his curiosity piqued. "You said you have a place to stay, is it safe?" Finks smirked. "Yeah, it's safe. It's a bit of a hidden spot, but it'll be perfect for laying low for a while." Phaeton scowled, still suspicious of Finks's intentions. "How do we know we can trust you? This could all be a trap." Finks scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Look, I wouldn't have jumped in to help you too if I wanted you dead. Besides, you need me. You can't stay here, and you're too injured to fight off anyone else who comes after you." Haruto, sensing the tension between Phaeton and Finks, stepped in. "Enough," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a king. "We will follow you, Finks. But if you betray us, know that the consequences will be severe." Finks raised his hands in mock surrender, a playful grin on his face. "Understood, Your Majesty." The three boys left the makeshift shelter behind, weaving through the dark and twisting alleyways of Meteor City. As they moved, Haruto couldn't help but feel a growing curiosity towards their new companion. He turned to Finks, his purple eyes demanding answers. "Tell me, Finks, what horrid destiny picked you to be born in Meteor City? How did you end up in a life among the filth and misery of this place?" Finks's expression turned somber, the weight of his past evident in his eyes. "I was born here, just like you and Phaeton. My family was killed when I was young, and I've been surviving on my own ever since. I've had to learn to fight, to protect myself and take what I need." Haruto nodded, his expression solemn. "We understand that all too well. We, too, have had to fight to survive in this hellish place." Phaeton's scowl deepened, but he remained silent. He knew that they needed allies to succeed in their ambitious goals, but trusting others didn't come easily to him. As they continued through the dark alleyways, he kept a wary eye on Finks, ready for any sign of betrayal. Eventually, they arrived at Finks's hidden hideout, a small and well-concealed shelter tucked away in a forgotten corner of Meteor City. Inside, it was surprisingly clean and organized, a stark contrast to the chaos and squalor of the city around them. As they settled in, Haruto continued to question Finks, seeking to understand the true nature of his new ally. "You said you wish to become the strongest fighter in the world. What drives this ambition?" Finks hesitated for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he considered his answer. "Power," he finally replied, his voice firm. "In this world, those with power can control their own destinies. They can take what they want, protect those they care about, and change the world around them. I've seen what happens to those without power, and I refuse to be one of them." After a bit more talk, Haruto, Phaeton, and Finks began to fall into a routine. Finks, knowing more about Meteor City than either of the brothers, showed them hidden spots and resources they never knew existed. With his guidance, they found places to steal and scavenge from more easily. They also began learning how to fight more effectively and develop new techniques, Over the course of 2 years, the 3 boys honed their skills and abilities, growing stronger and more formidable each day. Their preternatural perception allowed them to sense danger before it arrived, and their enhanced strength and agility enabled them to overcome obstacles and opponents with ease. They developed immense speed and reflexes, making them nearly impossible to track, while their enhanced stamina, advanced durability, and enhanced endurance allowed them to withstand physical punishment that would break others. Their time in Meteor City exposed them to a variety of toxins, and they built up an immense poison resistance as a result. They learned to control their muscles and joints, allowing them to move in ways others couldn't, and even developed the ability to extend their nails into claws for close-quarters combat. Haruto, Phaeton, and Finks became masters of hand-to-hand combat, with each boy developing his own unique fighting style. They learned to enter an assassin mode, where they could strike with lethal force and precision while remaining virtually undetectable. Their stealth abilities were further refined through the use of techniques like the rhythm echo, which allowed them to move in complete silence and create afterimages to confuse their enemies. They became experts at tailing targets, able to follow their quarry without being detected, and mastered the shadow step technique, which allowed them to move from one hiding spot to another without being seen. Over the course of those 2 years, the bond between Haruto, Phaeton, and Finks grew stronger. Haruto, despite being the youngest, showed an uncanny ability to lead and make decisions, drawing on the innate majesty and ambition that he inherited from Meruem. His natural leadership shone through in a number of critical situations, forcing both Phaeton and Finks to follow his words without question. One day, the boys were attempting to steal some valuable medical supplies from a corrupt doctor's clinic. They had been planning the heist for days, studying the clinic's security and devising the perfect strategy. Haruto had taken charge of the operation, assigning each of them specific roles and outlining their escape plan. As they crouched in the shadows, Haruto spoke softly, his voice filled with confidence. "Phaeton, you'll sneak in through the back and disable the security system. Finks, you'll create a distraction out front to draw the guards away. I'll slip inside and grab the supplies." Phaeton nodded, a determined gleam in his gray eyes. "Understood." Finks smirked, seemingly unfazed by the danger they were about to face. "Sounds like a plan, boss." The operation went smoothly at first. Phaeton managed to disable the security system without raising an alarm, and Finks successfully lured the guards away from the clinic. Haruto slipped inside, his movements swift and silent. As he rummaged through the clinic's stockpile, Haruto found the medical supplies they were after. But he also discovered a small room filled with captives, Meteor City residents who had been taken by the corrupt doctor and used for illegal experiments. Haruto's eyes flashed with anger, and his decision was immediate. He returned to the boys, his voice filled with determination. "Change of plans. We're going to free those people." Phaeton frowned, irritation flickering across his face. "That wasn't part of the plan, Haruto. We don't have time for this." Finks, however, seemed intrigued. "What's the story?" Haruto explained the situation, his voice tinged with disgust. "The doctor has been kidnapping people from Meteor City and experimenting on them. We can't just leave them to suffer." Phaeton hesitated, his loyalty to Haruto warring with his practical nature. "Fine," he growled, his eyes narrowing. "But we need to be quick." Chapter 3. With their new objective in mind, the boys moved quickly. Phaeton, ever the pragmatist, reactivated the security system, trapping the guards outside the clinic. Finks, using his brute strength, broke down the door to the room where the captives were held. Haruto, taking charge as always, directed the frightened and confused captives to safety. As the last of the captives were escorted out of the clinic, Haruto noticed a small, 3-year-old girl hiding in the corner, her eyes wide with fear. He scooped her up into his arms, his expression softening for a moment before his eyes hardened once more. He turned to Phaeton and Finks, his voice carrying the authority of a king. "This city is ours. Everyone in it, the weak, the downtrodden, they are our subjects. We cannot allow others to hurt them." Phaeton scowled, clearly irritated by the deviation from their original plan. "And what do you propose we do? We can't save everyone in Meteor City." Haruto's gaze was unwavering, his voice filled with conviction. "Our ambition is to rise above this wretched place and claim our rightful place in the world. But we cannot turn our backs on our people. We will protect them, not out of mercy, but out of duty. If we cannot even help our own, what use is our ambition?" Finks, intrigued by Haruto's kingly speech, nodded slowly. "He's got a point, Phaeton. If we want to rule, we need to prove ourselves worthy of that rule." Phaeton grumbled but didn't argue further, knowing that Haruto's words held truth. As they returned to their hideout, Haruto cradled the young girl in his arms. Her laughter reminded him of a canary's song, so he decided to name her Canary. From that day on, she became a part of their makeshift family. Over time, Haruto continued to demonstrate his leadership skills and innate majesty, further solidifying the loyalty of Phaeton and Finks. One such example occurred a few months after rescuing Canary when the boys discovered a group of thugs preying on Meteor City residents. As they watched the thugs from the shadows, Haruto's eyes flashed with anger. "This cannot be allowed to continue. These people are our subjects, and it is our duty to protect them." Phaeton, ever the realist, raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose we do that?" Haruto looked at them darkly and said without any hesitation, "We will kill them to send a message." Phaeton's eyes gleamed with a vicious hunger, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Now that's a plan I can get behind." Finks chuckled, his voice filled with dark amusement. "Sounds like fun." The boys sprang into action, their movements swift and silent as they stalked their prey. Haruto led the way, his royal bearing evident in every step, while Phaeton and Finks followed closely behind. They watched and waited, studying their targets and picking the perfect moment to strike. When the time was right, Haruto launched himself into the fray, his movements a blur as he tore through the thugs with brutal efficiency. Phaeton and Finks joined him, their own unique fighting styles complementing Haruto's perfectly. As they dispatched the last of the thugs, Haruto stood tall, blood dripping from his extended claws. He surveyed the scene with a king's satisfaction, knowing that they had sent a clear message: the people of Meteor City were under their protection, and any who dared to harm them would face the wrath of Haruto and his allies. The boys returned to their hideout, where they found Canary waiting for them. Her laughter, like the song of a canary, filled the air as they regaled her with tales of their exploits. Over the next 2 years, Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, and Canary had been forced to relocate their hideout multiple times. Their deeds had not gone unnoticed, and as their reputation grew, so did the danger they faced. They didn't have a fixed home or the guarantee of food on the table, but they always found a way. Haruto, now 7 years old, led the group with the authority of a king. Phaeton, 10, and Finks, 11, followed him loyally, their unwavering devotion a testament to his innate majesty. Canary, who was now 4 years old, had become an adorable little sister to the group. She was especially attached to Haruto, following him around like a shadow. As the years passed, Canary grew into an adorable little sister figure for the group. She was most attached to Haruto, who had saved her life and given her a new family. Though she showed loyalty to Haruto in the same way Phaeton and Finks did, her relationship with him was more akin to that of a little sister. Haruto didn't mind this, he felt a deep sense of responsibility towards Canary, and her presence brought a rare warmth to their lives. One day, as the group was preparing to move their hideout once again, they found themselves confronted by a group of people. It seemed their past deeds had finally caught up with them. The leader of the group, a sinister-looking man with a twisted grin, stepped forward. "You've caused quite a stir, haven't you?" The man sneered, his eyes sweeping over Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, and Canary. "You've made a lot of enemies. And now, it's time for you to pay." Haruto glared at the man, his purple eyes burning with royal fury. "You dare to threaten us? You will regret your words." Phaeton smirked, cracking his knuckles. "Yeah, I think it's time we showed these fools who they're dealing with. Finks grinned, his blue eyes gleaming with excitement. This should be fun. The man's twisted grin grew wider. Oh, we're not afraid of you. You've made a lot of enemies, and they've sent us to take care of you, once and for all. As the group of enemies advanced, Canary clung to Haruto's side, fear in her eyes. Haruto wrapped an arm around her protectively, his gaze never leaving their opponents. Stay close, Canary. We won't let anything happen to you. Canary nodded, her small hands gripping Haruto's shirt tightly. I know, big brother. Chapter 4. With a roar, the battle began. Haruto, Phaeton, and Finks launched themselves at their attackers, their movements swift and precise. The enemy group quickly found themselves outmatched by the trio's incredible combat skills, honed over years of fighting and training. As the fight continued, Haruto felt his innate majesty and ambition growing stronger. He moved through the battle with the grace and authority of a king, his movement steady and efficient. The enemy group's resolve began to waver as they realized the full extent of Haruto's power. Phaeton, ruthless and easily angered, fought with an unmatched ferocity. His every movement was calculated, his strikes cold and lethal. The enemy group found themselves unable to keep up with his relentless assault, their numbers dwindling rapidly. Finks, always eager for a fight, reveled in the chaos, his strength and agility on full display. He moved effortlessly through the battle, striking down opponent after opponent with a wicked grin on his face. Despite their strength and skill, Haruto and his companions started to fall back as the battle went on. Their enemies were numerous and ruthless, and the fight began to take its toll on the trio. Phaeton and Finks fought with everything they had, but they couldn't hold back the relentless onslaught forever. Phaeton, his body battered and bruised, moved like a whirlwind, his every strike cold and lethal. He let out a furious roar as he tore through the enemy ranks, but even his seemingly limitless rage couldn't keep him standing forever. A powerful blow caught him off guard, sending him crashing to the ground. Finks, his once smirking face now twisted with pain, found himself surrounded. He fought on, his strength and agility on full display, but the enemies closed in on him, their attacks relentless. Eventually, a brutal strike knocked him off his feet, and he fell, gasping for breath. Haruto's heart clenched as he watched his friends go down, but he refused to give in. His body was beaten and scarred, but his innate arrogance and ambition drove him forward. He stood tall, the authority of a king radiating from him, his purple eyes burning with defiance. He moved through the battle with the grace and authority of a king, his movement steady and efficient. The enemy group's resolve began to waver as they realized the full extent of Haruto's power. One of the enemies lunged at him, a wicked grin on their face. Haruto's eyes narrowed as he easily dodged the attack, his voice cold and filled with authority. You dare to challenge me? I will be the king of this city, and you are nothing but worms beneath my feet. The enemy's grin faltered, their eyes filled with fear as Haruto struck them down with brutal efficiency. The others hesitated, their confidence shattered by the sheer force of Haruto's presence. But even Haruto's immense power and ambition had its limits. His body ached with exhaustion, and his movements slowed. The enemy group saw their chance and surged forward, determined to take him down. Haruto's eyes blazed with defiance as he stood his ground, his voice filled with the authority of a king. I will not fall. I will protect my family and my people, no matter the cost. After a little longer, Haruto found himself utterly worn out and unable to fight back. He had given everything he had to protect his friends and the people of Meteor City, but his body was reaching its limits. The enemy leader, the sinister man with the twisted grin, approached Haruto with a gleeful expression. The other enemies, still standing, surrounded the wounded boy, smirking and leering at him. The man sneered down at Haruto, his voice dripping with malice. Well, the mighty Haruto, brought to his knees. How does it feel to be at the mercy of your enemies? He taunted, his eyes cold and cruel. Haruto, his body aching and barely able to stand, refused to let his spirit break. His eyes burned with defiance and determination. I will never be at your mercy, he spat, the arrogance and innate majesty of a king shining through even in his weakened state. The enemy leader chuckled darkly, an evil glint in his eyes. Then let's see how far that arrogance will get you, boy. Kneel before me, apologize, and admit that you are nothing but a worm. Admit that I am the true king here, he demanded, a twisted smile on his face. Haruto, despite the pain and exhaustion that threatened to consume him, glared at the man. His voice was cold, filled with the authority of a king. I will not kneel to you or anyone else. I will never admit to being anything less than the king I am destined to be. You are nothing, a mere obstacle in my path to greatness. 1. The enemy leader's face twisted with rage at Haruto's defiance. He clenched his fists, his voice a low, dangerous growl. You insolent brat! You truly believe that you can defy me, even in your pathetic state? Phaeton, still lying on the ground, his body battered and bruised, couldn't help but smile at Haruto's unyielding spirit. Though he was in pain, he took pride in the fact that his leader refused to back down, even in the face of death. Finks, gasping for breath as he struggled to regain his strength, felt a surge of admiration for Haruto. Even though the odds were against them, Haruto's kingly presence and unwavering determination made it seem as if they still had a fighting chance. Haruto stared at the enemy leader, his purple eyes blazing with defiance. I will never submit to you. I am the future king of this world, you are nothing but a stepping stone. The enemy leader snarled, his face contorted with fury. You dare to defy me, boy? You will regret your arrogance. As he raised his hand to strike Haruto, an unexpected sound caught his attention. The soft, yet determined voice of Canary rang through the air, her small body trembling with fear but her eyes filled with determination. Leave big brother Haruto alone, she shouted, her voice carrying the strength of her love and loyalty. The enemy leader turned his gaze to the small girl, an evil grin spreading across his face. And what can a pathetic little girl like you do to stop me? He taunted, laughing cruelly. A voice reverberated in the opening, powerful and commanding, stopping the enemy leader in his tracks. She can't, but I can. Chapter 5. Everyone turned to see the source of the voice. A man stood at the entrance to the hideout, his presence alone enough to make the enemies falter. He was of average height, with a lean but strong build. His hair was white, with a few strands of black, and his eyes were a piercing gray. He wore dirty, ragged clothing that covered his entire body, along with a mouthpiece that concealed his nose and mouth. The thugs, recognizing the man, immediately fell to their knees, their faces pale with fear. Koshiro, they gasped, trembling at the sight of the prominent figure. Koshiro, a 65-year-old Meteor city elder, was sent by the council to capture Haruto and his friends due to their actions. He was supposed to apprehend them and teach them a lesson, but upon seeing their unwavering determination and loyalty to each other, he realized that they were filled with potential. Although misguided, their hearts were in the right place. As the enemy leader stared in shock, Koshiro walked towards him, his steps measured and deliberate. You dare to threaten these children? He asked, his voice cold and filled with contempt. You are nothing but a coward, picking on those weaker than you. The enemy leader, clearly terrified, stuttered out a weak response. These brats have caused chaos in our territory. They need to be taught a lesson. Koshiro's gaze swept over the wounded Haruto and his friends, then back to the enemy leader. And who are you to teach them? You are nothing more than a parasite, preying on the weak and the vulnerable. Leave this place, now, or face my wrath. The enemy leader hesitated for a moment before ordering his remaining thugs to retreat. As they hurried away, Koshiro turned his attention to Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, and Canary. You have fought well, he said, his voice softened but still firm. But you must learn the proper way to fight and what to fight for. Your actions have brought you to the attention of the council, and they have sent me to guide you. Haruto, despite his injuries, stood tall, his purple eyes blazing with defiance. We don't need your guidance. We can handle ourselves. Koshiro, upon seeing Haruto's unyielding spirit, felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He recognized in the young boy the spirit of a king, a trait he hadn't seen in many years. The elder had failed in the past to unite Meteor City, as it was too divided and broken. The outside world treated them like scum, and Koshiro had longed for someone who could bring the people of Meteor City together to stand against the injustices they faced. In Haruto, he saw that potential. "You have the spirit of a king," Koshiro said, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and determination. "And it is that spirit that Meteor City needs. I believe that you could be the one to unite our people and lead us to a brighter future." Haruto's eyes narrowed, his arrogant demeanor still present, but a hint of curiosity flickered in his gaze. "And why should I trust you? What do you know about being a king?" Koshiro smiled, a sad, distant look in his eyes. "I once dreamed of uniting Meteor City, of standing against those who would treat us as nothing more than trash. But I failed. I was unable to rally the people and bring about the change I longed for. But in you, I see a spirit far stronger than my own. You have the potential to achieve what I could not." Phaeton, still recovering from the battle, listened to Koshiro's words with interest. The elder's passion and belief in Haruto struck a chord in him, and he found himself wanting to see their leader fulfill this destiny. Finks, his breath slowly returning to normal, nodded in agreement. He saw the same potential in Haruto and was willing to follow him anywhere. Canary, her small body still trembling, looked up at Haruto with shining eyes. She believed in him, more than anyone else. Haruto considered Koshiro's words, his eyes narrowing as he weighed the possibilities. Finally, he spoke, his voice regal and commanding. "Very well. If you truly believe that I am capable of uniting Meteor City and becoming its king, then I will accept your guidance." Koshiro bowed his head in respect. "Thank you, young king. I promise to do everything in my power to help you fulfill your destiny." Koshiro decided to hide Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, and Canary from the other council members, fearing they might plot Haruto's untimely demise. He instructed them to return to his dwelling and maintain a low profile, acting as his students and never revealing their true ambition to anyone else. Upon arriving at Koshiro's dwelling, the group took in their new surroundings. The place was modest, with a few rooms and a small training area outside. As they settled in, Koshiro addressed them, his voice firm but gentle. "From now on, you will live here with me. You will learn the ways of Meteor City, and I will teach you how to harness your strengths and improve your weaknesses. But you must promise me that you will not reveal your true purpose to anyone. Is that understood?" Haruto, his purple eyes burning with ambition, nodded. "We understand. We will do whatever it takes to achieve our destiny." Phaeton, his face still bruised from the recent battle, grunted in agreement. "As long as you can help us become stronger, we'll follow your lead." Finks, his arms crossed, nodded. "Yeah, we trust you, old man." Canary, her small hand gripping Haruto's tightly, looked up at Koshiro with determination in her eyes. "We'll do our best." Koshiro smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "Very well, then let us begin." Chapter 6. Over the next few weeks, Koshiro taught them the history of Meteor City, its customs and traditions, and the importance of unity among its people. He trained them in various combat techniques, focusing on their individual strengths and weaknesses. One evening, as they sat together around a small fire, Koshiro decided it was time to delve deeper into the harsh reality of their world. He gazed at the young faces before him, each one filled with anticipation and resolve. "Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, Canary," Koshiro began, his voice steady and solemn, "it is time for you to understand what Meteor City truly is and how the other countries treat us." Haruto leaned forward, his purple eyes narrowed with interest. "Tell us, Koshiro. What is it that we need to know?" Koshiro took a deep breath, his gray eyes clouded with sorrow. "Meteor City is a place of outcasts, the unwanted, the forgotten. We are a city that the rest of the world has deemed unworthy of their care and attention. They throw their trash and their waste upon us, believing that we are no better than the refuse they discard." Phaeton clenched his fists, a fire burning in his eyes. What gives them the right to treat us like garbage? We are just as human as they are. Koshiro nodded gravely. You're right, Phaeton. We are human beings, deserving of respect and dignity. But the world refuses to see us that way. They fear us, our power, and our potential. They would rather see us suffer and die than acknowledge our worth. Finks, his arms crossed, frowned. And why should we care what they think? We know our own worth. We don't need their approval. Koshiro sighed, looking at the young faces before him. You may be right, Finks. But if we are to change the fate of Meteor City and forge a new path for our people, we must first understand the world's perspective. Canary, her small body trembling, spoke up. Big Brother Haruto will change everything. He will show the world that we deserve better. Haruto's eyes flashed with determination. You're right, Canary. I will become the king of Meteor City, and I will lead our people to a brighter future. Koshiro nodded, a hint of a smile on his face. I believe you can, Haruto. But it will not be an easy path. The world will fight against you every step of the way. Are you prepared for that? Haruto's expression was fierce, his voice filled with the authority of a king. I will not back down, no matter the challenge. I was born to rule, and I will not let anyone stand in my way. Koshiro's eyes shone with pride. Very well. Then we will begin by learning about the different countries and their beliefs. We must understand our enemies before we can hope to change their minds. Phaeton scoffed, his eyes narrowed in contempt. I don't care about their beliefs. They are all hypocrites, preaching peace and justice while they treat us like dirt. Koshiro regarded Phaeton with a calm expression. Phaeton, it is not enough to simply condemn our enemies. We must learn their ways, their strengths, and their weaknesses. Only then can we hope to change their hearts and minds. Phaeton snorted but fell silent, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Koshiro took a moment to gather his thoughts, then began to explain the world's most powerful organizations and countries to the young group. First, we have the V5, a political alliance of the 5 most powerful and influential countries in the world, the United States of Saherta, the Republic of East Gordo, the Hiwagworu Empire, the Kakan Empire, and the Federation of Ochima. These countries work together to maintain global stability, but they also have their own agendas and often act in their own self-interests. Haruto raised an eyebrow, his voice filled with disdain. And how does their self-interest relate to Meteor City? Koshiro sighed, his eyes filled with sadness. They fear us, Haruto. Our strength, our resilience, and our independence are threats to their authority. They would rather see us suffer than acknowledge us as equals. Phaeton's eyes narrowed, his anger barely contained. Then let them fear us. We don't need their recognition. We will carve our own path, with or without their approval. Koshiro nodded, acknowledging Phaeton's fierce determination. Yes, we will. But we must also be strategic in our approach. We cannot simply lash out at the world and expect to be victorious. We must learn about their weaknesses and exploit them. Finks, his arms still crossed, asked, what other organizations should we be aware of? Koshiro thought for a moment before continuing. There is the Hunter Association, an organization made up of skilled individuals known as hunters. They carry out various tasks and missions, often for the benefit of humanity. However, their allegiance is not always clear, and they have their own internal struggles. Canary, her eyes wide with curiosity, inquired, are there any organizations that might help us in our quest? Koshiro shook his head. It is unlikely. Most organizations are focused on their own objectives and will not involve themselves in the affairs of others, especially not in the affairs of Meteor City. Haruto's eyes flashed with determination. Then we will forge our own alliances, create our own network of support. We will not bow to the whims of others. Koshiro smiled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. That is the spirit of a true king, Haruto. But remember, we must be wise in our approach. We cannot afford to make enemies without reason. Phaeton, his face still twisted with anger, spoke up. I don't care about making enemies. They should fear us, just as they fear their own shadows. Koshiro sighed, his voice firm but gentle. Phaeton, we must walk a fine line between asserting our power and maintaining a level of diplomacy. We cannot hope to change the world if we are constantly at war with it. Phaeton grumbled but said nothing more, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and understanding. Haruto's gaze met Koshiro's, his voice filled with conviction. Tell us more about these V5 countries. How do they maintain their power? Koshiro, sensing the determination in Haruto's voice, began to provide more information about the V5 countries. Very well. The United States of Saherta is a democratic nation that holds significant influence through its military and economic power. They have a strong presence in international organizations and often use their influence to shape global policy. Phaeton scoffed. Their military might doesn't scare us. We can take them on. Koshiro continued, ignoring Phaeton's outburst. The Republic of East Gorto is an authoritarian state with a powerful military and a highly centralized government. They are often at odds with the United States of Saherta, but they share the same goal of maintaining global stability. Finks interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, how noble of them. Koshiro moved on to the next country. The Hiwagworu Empire is a monarchy, known for its wealth and cultural influence. They are masters of diplomacy and intrigue, often manipulating others to achieve their goals. Haruto's eyes narrowed, a flicker of interest in his gaze. Their tactics could be useful for us to learn from. The Kakan Empire, Koshiro continued, is a rapidly expanding nation with a focus on economic growth and military prowess. They are ambitious and have been known to undermine their rivals in order to achieve their goals. Canary chimed in, a hint of worry in her voice. That sounds dangerous. We should be cautious around them. Finally, Koshiro spoke of the last member of the V5. The Federation of Ochima is a technologically advanced nation that holds significant sway in global affairs. They pride themselves on their innovation and often use it to maintain their position of power. Haruto's eyes gleamed with ambition. That's enough about the V5. What other organizations should we be aware of? Chapter 7. The following morning, the sun had barely risen when the training commenced. Koshiro was an early riser, and he had decided that his young disciples would be as well. Despite their heavy lids and grumbles of protest, Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, and Canary followed the elder out to the makeshift training ground. Koshiro looked at the children before him. Haruto, standing tall and proud, his purple eyes glinting with a fierce determination. Phaeton, sulking slightly at being forced out of bed so early but ready to fight nonetheless. Finks, his usual calm replaced with an eagerness to train, and Canary, her small frame brimming with nervous energy. We will start with physical training, Koshiro announced, his gray eyes surveying them critically. Strength, speed, and stamina are all crucial in a fight. Phaeton immediately protested, his impatience getting the better of him. We know how to fight, old man. We need to learn something new, something more powerful. Koshiro didn't respond immediately, instead meeting Phaeton's gaze with a level one of his own. And you think the path to greater power does not require a solid foundation, young Phaeton? Phaeton clenched his fists, but remained silent. He didn't like the idea of going back to basics, but he trusted Koshiro enough to follow his lead. Over the next few hours, Koshiro drilled them in various exercises. They ran laps around the training area, did push-ups, squats, and learned how to lift weights. Their bodies were pushed to the limit, and sweat dripped from their brows. But not one of them complained or asked to stop. They all understood the importance of the training. After a brief rest, Koshiro led them through a series of combat drills. They sparred with each other under his watchful eyes, their movements sharp and precise. Koshiro corrected their stances, their grip, and their attacks, making sure they understood every detail. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The group trained diligently under Koshiro's guidance, their strength and skill increasing with each passing day. But as they grew physically stronger, Koshiro knew it was time to introduce them to the world of Nen. Nen is a technique that allows a living being to use and manipulate their own life energy, known as aura, Koshiro explained one evening. He sat on a log, the four of them surrounding him, their eyes wide with anticipation. Life energy? Haruto repeated, his eyes sparkling with interest. Yes, Koshiro nodded. Everyone has aura, but not everyone knows how to control it. With Nen, you can channel your aura to enhance your physical abilities, project it outward to create barriers, and even use it to create unique abilities. Each of them absorbed his words, their minds buzzing with possibilities. Canary was the first to break the silence. Can we learn to use Nen? Yes, but it will not be easy, Koshiro warned. Learning Nen requires patience, dedication, and a strong will. Are you ready for that? Each of them nodded, their faces serious. We are, Haruto replied, his voice firm. Overnight. It requires patience, determination, and a strong will. Are you ready for that? We're ready, Haruto spoke for all of them, his tone commanding. His youthful voice carried a weight that seemed much older, as if he were echoing the sentiments of a king. Their resolve set, Koshiro looked over each of them. Good. Now let's get back to work. Despite their eagerness to learn about Nen, Koshiro didn't delve deeper into the mystical energy that day. Instead, he continued with their physical training, pushing them harder, forcing them to endure more than they thought possible. Canary faltered during the push-ups, her tiny arms shaking under her weight. Haruto was next to her in an instant, his face set in a determined frown. You can do it, Canary. Just one more, he urged her on. She looked up, met his gaze, and pushed herself off the ground, gritting her teeth against the strain. Phaeton and Finks grappled with each other in the dust, their bodies slick with sweat. Phaeton managed to pin Finks down, but the latter was quick to wriggle free, a determined glint in his eyes. They exchanged a look, a mutual understanding passing between them. They were rivals, yes, but also teammates, partners. In the scorching afternoon sun, the children continued their grueling training regime under Koshiro's stern watch. Muscles ached and throats were parched, yet not a single one of them requested a break. This was the groundwork they needed to pave their way to learn Nen. Between ragged breaths, Canary voiced her struggle. I can't do another. Her fists timed in the soil as she attempted another push-up, her small body quivering with the strain. Haruto, his own sweat dripping onto the dry ground below, responded without breaking his rhythm. Yes, you can, Canary. You are stronger than you think. Push through. His words were both a command and an encouragement, and the young girl found a burst of strength she didn't know she had, pushing herself off the ground. Amidst the grunts and groans, Phaeton found a moment to tease Finks. Did you hear that, Finks? His Majesty is bestowing words of wisdom. Finks, gasping for breath, shot back, at least he isn't wasting his breath whining like you, Phaeton. He smirked at his comrade's glare, clearly enjoying the banter. Phaeton was about to retort when Koshiro interjected, enough chatter. Focus on your training. There was a moment's silence as everyone took Koshiro's words to heart. Haruto, his purple eyes glinting with determination, set his jaw and pushed himself harder, setting an example for the rest. His actions weren't lost on the others, who resumed their tasks with a newfound zeal. By the time the sun was beginning to set, their bodies were covered in dust and sweat, their muscles burning from the strain. But despite the physical toll, their spirits were high. They'd pushed their limits, each one of them growing stronger, one step closer to their goal. Chapter 8. As they gathered around a small fire for dinner, their talk was a mix of playful jibes, shared laughter, and discussion about Nen, their anticipation palpable in the cool night air. The evening found the group weary but in high spirits, the day's rigorous training a test of their mettle. A small fire crackled and danced in the clearing, casting warm orange hues onto their dirt-streaked faces. Koshiro sat a little apart from the children, watching them with quiet approval. Haruto was the first to settle down by the fire, his tall frame bathed in the warm glow of the dancing flames. He watched the fire, a contemplative expression on his young face. The flickering flame seemed to reflect in his intense purple eyes. Finks and Phaeton were in the middle of a heated discussion about their day's progress, their voices merging with the crackling of the fire. Canary was close by, her eyes darting between Haruto and the others, a gentle admiration coloring her gaze when it landed on Haruto. It was subtle, her affection, not openly displayed, but there if one knew where to look. "Haruto, why do you think Koshiro is making us do all this?" Finks asked, breaking away from his conversation with Phaeton. Haruto looked over at Finks, his gaze unwavering. "Because he wants us to be strong. To survive." "But why?" Phaeton interjected, his voice gruff. "We're strong enough." Haruto's gaze never wavered from the fire. "We're strong, yes. But not strong enough. Not yet." Phaeton opened his mouth to retort, but Haruto cut him off. "Phaeton, do you remember what life was like before Koshiro found us?" A silence fell over the group. They all remembered. The hunger, the fear, the cold. Survival had been their only goal. They could make do, but they were always worrying about the next meal, the next fight. Haruto continued, his voice steady. "We weren't helpless children, but if it was another person instead of Koshiro, we would have been dead. We would have get stronger, faster on our own. But if we want to be untouchable, unbeatable, we need to be more than physical power. We need Nen." Phaeton grunted in response, a begrudging acceptance in his silence. Finks merely nodded, his expression thoughtful. Canary watched them all with wide, curious eyes, her gaze always returning to Haruto. Their meal was a simple one, a stew made from what they could forage and hunt, the smell permeating the clearing. As they ate, a comfortable silence settled, only broken by the occasional low conversation. Canary, who had finished her meal first, looked up at Koshiro, her large eyes glinting with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "Master Koshiro," she began, her voice soft, "can you tell us more about Nen?" Koshiro glanced at her, his lips curling into a smile. "Why are you asking, Canary? Are you trying to get ahead in your training?" Canary flushed at his tease but held his gaze. "No, Master Koshiro," she replied earnestly, "I just want to understand. It sounds like it could change everything." Phaeton, who had been quietly eating, looked up at Koshiro, his eyes alight with interest. "She's got a point," he muttered, crossing his arms. "We've been training hard physically, but it's the Nen that's going to make a real difference, isn't it?" Koshiro observed the eager faces around him, sensing their readiness. "Yes," he admitted, "you're correct, Phaeton. But Nen isn't something to rush into. It's not a shortcut to power, it's a path. And like any path, it requires the right preparation." Days faded into nights and back into days again. Each dawn brought with it the challenge of outdoing the previous day's efforts, of rising above the barriers they'd barely breached before. Koshiro's rigorous regimen tested them relentlessly, but the children held on, their fiery resolve untouched by the punishing training. One sweltering morning, as they finished yet another round of grueling laps around the field, Canary stumbled and fell. Phaeton, who was trailing right behind her, barely avoided colliding with her. He stopped, frowned, and extended a hand to help her up. "What are you doing, falling over?" Phaeton's tone was biting, yet his fingers were gentle around her wrist. Canary scrambled up, refusing to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'll try harder." "Damn right, you will," Phaeton snapped, his gaze already on Haruto, who had stopped a few steps ahead. In the meanwhile, Haruto, having heard the exchange, turned around. His purple eyes were firm, yet not unkind. "Phaeton, we don't leave our own behind." Phaeton frowned at Haruto, but he didn't argue. Instead, he silently returned to his side, his dark eyes storming with a mix of irritation and a begrudging respect for the younger boy. His gaze was challenging, testing Haruto's authority. Haruto met his gaze without a flinch, his expression steady. After a tense moment, Phaeton grunted and looked away, a tacit admission of defeat. For the rest of the day, Canary worked twice as hard to keep up. Her small frame strained against the exercises, yet she continued without complaint. Her determination didn't go unnoticed by Haruto, who threw an approving nod her way, his eyes reflecting a hint of respect. Canary couldn't help but blush under his gaze, her heart pounding. Finks, ever observant, caught this exchange and gave Phaeton a sidelong glance, a playful smirk playing on his lips. Phaeton only scowled in response, his competitive spirit clearly irked by Haruto's magnanimity. Weeks passed, and each day brought a new struggle, a new achievement. They began to push each other, their rivalry fueling their progress. Phaeton, in particular, refused to be outdone by Haruto, often pushing himself to the point of exhaustion. Despite the constant rivalry, a silent understanding brewed amongst the children, binding them together as they grew stronger under Koshiro's guidance. Chapter 9. Ladies and gentlemen, gather round and lend me your ears. Let us raise a virtual toast to Bradley, the valiant soul who braved uncharted realms and claimed the coveted title of my very first patron. May his unwavering support be a beacon of inspiration for all future adventurers who dare to join this merry band of readers. Give a round of applause to Bradley, the trailblazer extraordinaire. The night was cool, the sky scattered with countless stars. They sat around the campfire after a particularly grueling day of training. Their bodies were sore, and they were basking in the comforting warmth of the fire. Koshiro had stepped away for a moment, leaving them to their own devices. A year had passed since that pivotal discussion around the campfire. Haruto, now an 8-year-old, carried himself with a grace and dignity that belied his age, reflecting a majesty reminiscent of Meruem, the king he was meant to replace. His features had become sharper, his gaze, unwavering. Phaeton and Finks, now both 11, were a striking contrast to each other. Phaeton was taciturn and enigmatic, his silence only broken by sharp, biting remarks, while Finks was more genial and jovial, with an underlying strength that wasn't to be underestimated. Canary, at 7, was as sprightly as ever, her bright eyes reflecting a spirit that refused to be dampened. Their training had evolved dramatically over the year. Every morning began with a run through the dense forest surrounding their camp, their path riddled with obstacles set by Koshiro. Fallen trees to vault over, rivers to cross, steep hills to climb, it was a rigorous test of their endurance and agility. Afternoons were dedicated to combat practice, an intense session of sparring that left them breathless and battered. Despite the difference in their ages, Haruto often pitted himself against Phaeton or Finks, refusing to back down, his eyes burning with an intensity that defied his youth. By nightfall, they worked on their agility, navigating their way through the forest with nothing but the faint moonlight to guide them. The darkness had ceased to be a hindrance, their senses now attuned to the nocturnal life that thrived around them. The forest echoed with the clanging of weapons and the scuffling of feet. Koshiro had tasked Haruto, Phaeton, and Finks with a three-way sparring match. Finks and Phaeton had, almost unspokenly, decided to join forces against Haruto. Despite the uneven odds, Haruto stood poised and steady in the clearing. His purple eyes scanned the battleground with an analytical gaze, a predatory smile on his lips. He was outnumbered, but he was far from cornered. "You sure you don't want to rethink this?" Haruto's tone was light, almost teasing. His eyes never left the pair in front of him. Phaeton scoffed, his eyes narrowing. "You're the one who needs to rethink, brat." Finks let out a low chuckle, adjusting his stance. Now, Phaeton. Let's not underestimate him." There was no further warning before the two charged. Haruto sidestepped Finks' lunge with grace, turning his attention to Phaeton. He spun and blocked Phaeton's sweeping strike with his own weapon. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying as their fierce gazes met. But Haruto was already steps ahead in this chaotic dance. He anticipated Phaeton's next attack, kicking up dirt into the older boy's eyes, forcing him to momentarily lose sight. This distraction gave Haruto the opportunity to focus on Finks. Finks, trying to capitalize on Phaeton's attack, was taken by surprise as Haruto swiftly closed the distance between them. Finks tried to land a punch, but Haruto was quicker. He parried the punch, grabbed Finks' extended arm, and twisted him around, positioning Finks between himself and the recovering Phaeton. As Phaeton wiped the dirt from his eyes and lunged forward again, Haruto released Finks, who was sent stumbling into Phaeton's path. Their bodies collided, causing both of them to lose their balance and crash onto the ground. The forest rang with Haruto's laughter, the 8-year-old standing tall. "You two are strong, but you're not thinking," he chided them, his gaze sharp and focused. "If you want to beat me, you'll need to use more than brute force." Phaeton growled, pushing Finks off him and getting back up. He locked eyes with Haruto, his irritation evident. Finks dusted himself off, chuckling as he straightened. Despite his light-hearted demeanor, his eyes held a new determination. Haruto readied himself, his body taut as a coiled spring, a challenging smirk playing on his lips. "Round 2? Haruto straightened himself up, a smirk playing on his lips. He bounced lightly on his feet, taking note of the battle-scarred ground beneath him and the two older boys in front of him. Even though he was younger and smaller, his agility and strength matched theirs. The look in his eyes spoke of his conviction, he wasn't the underdog. "Round 2, then?" he challenged, his voice ringing out clear and determined in the silent clearing. "Let's make this interesting," Phaeton said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. His irritation from the previous round was visible, yet his tone carried a subtle respect for the younger boy. He recognized Haruto's leadership, even if he didn't vocalize it. Finks only chuckled, shaking his head. "All right, Haruto. Let's see if you can dodge this." Without waiting for a response, Finks lunged forward. Instead of a straightforward attack, he moved with an erratic rhythm, using a technique they'd come to know as rhythm echo. This was an advanced technique that created afterimages of the user, disorienting the opponent. Phaeton joined him, employing the shadow step technique. His movements became so quick and fluid that he seemed to disappear, only to appear somewhere else in the blink of an eye. In the face of the combined onslaught, Haruto didn't flinch. He kept his gaze steady, reading their patterns and predicting their movements. It was a chess game, and he was the player while the others were pieces. Suddenly, he broke into a dash, his movements equally fluid. He weaved through the afterimages Finks created, his eyes always on the real one. Every time Phaeton reappeared in his vision, he'd use that opportunity to change his direction, causing the older boy to hit empty air or collide with one of Finks' afterimages. On the sidelines, Canary watched in wide-eyed admiration. She saw Haruto dodge, parry, and twist, always a step ahead of his attackers. She found herself cheering, shouting words of encouragement, her voice echoing in the otherwise silent forest. Chapter 10. "Watch your left, Haruto," she'd yell, or, "Behind you." And Haruto would react, instantly adjusting his movements. It was as if he had eyes at the back of his head. In the midst of the chaos, Haruto called out, his voice a clear command that cut through the confusion. "Phaeton, left. Finks, right." He wasn't just the opponent. He was also the conductor, leading them in their dance of combat. As they obeyed his instructions, attacking from the directions he'd just called out, Haruto executed a perfect backflip, causing them to collide with each other again. The two older boys groaned, slowly picking themselves up from the ground. There was no denying the frustration on their faces, but there was also something else. Respect. A newfound understanding of Haruto's skill and strategy. Phaeton dusted off his trousers, his temper flaring at the humiliation. He glanced at Finks, and there was an unspoken agreement between them. They needed to up their game. As Phaeton's anger mounted, so did his speed. His movements were lightning fast, each attack a blur to the naked eye. Yet, the frustration mounting within him also led to a string of muttered curses that grew louder with each passing second. "Damn brat," Phaeton hissed under his breath, charging towards Haruto once again. On the sidelines, Canary observed the shift in dynamics. "Haruto, be careful," she called out, her voice sharp with worry. "Phaeton's moving faster." Haruto merely nodded in acknowledgement. His gaze was firmly fixed on Phaeton, his body tensed, ready for the incoming attack. He wasn't worried, He noticed that Phaeton's increased speed had also made him predictable. Phaeton was like a thunderstorm, powerful but linear. His attacks followed a set pattern, and his muttered gibberish was a clear giveaway to his next move. Whenever the curses grew louder, Phaeton would strike with more force. The quieter he was, the faster he attacked. "Phaeton," Haruto called out, the hint of a smirk playing on his lips. "Your anger's showing." Phaeton's reaction was almost instantaneous. He let out a growl, charging at Haruto with an even faster pace. The shadow step technique he'd been using was now amplified by his anger, making him seem to disappear and reappear at an even more rapid pace. Haruto sidestepped, his movements a graceful dance as he kept pace with Phaeton's furious attacks. He evaded, dodged, and parried, always a step ahead. Each time Phaeton reappeared in his vision, he'd already anticipated where and made his move accordingly. Finks, meanwhile, was still trying to get his bearings, his gaze jumping between the two as he tried to keep up. He was caught in the whirlwind of their battle, torn between joining Phaeton and watching the battle unfold. But Haruto's words from earlier rang in his head. "Finks, right." Finks snapped back into the fray, implementing the rhythm echo technique once more. His movements became erratic, after images filling the space around him. This time, however, Haruto was prepared. He studied the after images, his gaze sharp and focused. "Phaeton, duck," Haruto yelled, making a sweeping kick at Finks who was closing in. Caught off guard, Finks stumbled back, tripping over the still crouched Phaeton. Yet again, they found themselves in a tangled heap on the ground. Haruto's laughter echoed through the clearing once more. He was truly enjoying this, the thrill of the challenge pumping adrenaline through his veins. He was confident, commanding, unshakable, just like the king he was destined to be. From the sidelines, Canary cheered, her heart swelling with admiration for Haruto. "You're amazing, Haruto," she exclaimed, her voice filled with awe and respect. Phaeton and Finks picked themselves up once more, their faces a mixture of frustration and resignation. They were clearly outmatched, but neither was ready to admit defeat just yet. They locked eyes with Haruto, an unspoken promise that they wouldn't give up so easily. Phaeton grunted, flexing his fingers. "You're good, Haruto," he admitted, his tone begrudging. "But you're not unbeatable. We'll see about round 3. Haruto only smirked, his purple eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Bring it on." Koshiro stood before the quartet, the embers of a sunset glowing behind him. There was Haruto, the budding leader, his tiny form always cloaked in an air of dignified audacity. Beside him stood Phaeton, the quiet storm, his menacing aura stark contrast to his age. There was Finks, the embodiment of toughness, always ready for action, and Canary, the silent yet sharp observer, whose loyalty to Haruto was unquestionable. "The Council of Meteor City has a task for you," Koshiro began, his grizzled voice echoed in the sparse training hall. The light in his eyes revealed both challenge and expectation. "The village of Dosu is under the thumb of a tyrant, Kagan. He collects egregious taxes, keeps the people in abject poverty. Your mission, deal with him." Haruto lifted his chin, eyes flickering with curiosity and ambition. "By deal, you mean?" "Interpret as you will," Koshiro replied, eyes fixed on Haruto. "Consider this your test." Haruto's lips curled into a slight smirk, a gleam of arrogance in his eyes. As if there was a need to test. Phaeton's eyes glinted with approval. He rarely spoke much, but his silence often spoke volumes. Finks cracked his knuckles, his eyes sharing the same fire. Canary watched from the sidelines, a supportive shadow. Oshiro leaned heavily on his gnarled walking stick, peering at them intently as he relayed details of the mission. Kagan surrounds himself with a small coterie of loyalists, 2 of whom are Nen users. They're raw, no developed Hatsu abilities to speak of. At this, Canary, the youngest of the 4, tilted her head, a look of uncertainty in her eyes. "What's a Hatsu, Koshiro?" He offered her a gentle smile, almost grandfatherly. "Ah, Canary. You're so keen to learn. Hatsu is the culmination of one's Nen training, the manifestation of your personal abilities and inclinations. For example, one may use Nen to enhance strength, while another may create illusions. Comment. His gaze then swept across the quartet. But remember, there are more subtle techniques too. Rhythm echo, for instance, an assassin's technique that creates afterimages of the body through a varying cadence of steps. Shadow step is another, moving stealthily by manipulating one's aura. Such skills might serve you well in Dosu. Chapter 11. Finks, always bristling with energy, shifted his stance. His eyes locked on Haruto, a grudging respect hidden in his steely gaze. He seemed more interested in their budding leader's response than Koshiro's instructions. Phaeton's smirk hadn't faded. An unarmed opponent, then, he drawled, confidence seeping from him. Barely worth the effort. Koshiro sighed, though there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Pride has been the downfall of many, Haruto. Never underestimate your opponents. Downfall isn't an option for me, Phaeton shot back, a gleam of defiance in his gaze. Haruto's smirk echoed Phaeton's, his eyes shimmering with quiet amusement. He was a tiny creature, but an unmistakable force, carrying himself with an innate majesty that belied his tender years. Like a young lion learning his roar, Haruto was only just beginning to tap into the depth of his inherent power. "It's not about pride, Phaeton," he said, addressing his older friend. His voice was firm, sure of his place at the head of this quartet. "It's about knowing our strengths, recognizing them and using them wisely." The hint of self-assurance in his tone mirrored his past life. Meruem, the late king of the Chimera-Ants, had always held a profound confidence, and Haruto seemed to have inherited it, though it was yet to fully awaken within him. Canary nodded from the side, her soft features hardening into a determined look. She may have been the youngest of them all, but she held a certain maturity and wisdom that surpassed her years. She was a loyal follower, a silent observer, her loyalty directed mostly towards Haruto, the one she had sworn to protect. "And I think," Haruto continued, his gaze still on Phaeton, "that you understand this better than anyone else." There was a silent authority in his voice, and for a moment, the hall fell quiet, each of them reflecting on his words. Phaeton broke the silence, his usual smirk back in place. "Of course," he said, addressing Haruto with an almost respectful nod. This subtle act was his silent agreement to Haruto's position as their leader. "It's all about power, right?" Koshiro, watching from the side, smiled at the display. These were his students, his fledglings, and he felt a surge of pride watching them interact. He was aware of the heavy burden resting on Haruto's young shoulders, but he also recognized the formidable support that Phaeton, Finks, and Canary provided. He knew that Haruto was only starting to tap into his inherited majesty, and that his influence over the others would only grow in time. With the details of their mission made clear, Koshiro dismissed the quartet for the night. The grizzled teacher watched as they filed out of the training hall, each carrying themselves with their unique mixture of audacity, quiet defiance, burning energy, and steadfast loyalty. Haruto, despite his age, didn't run off like a child. Instead, he walked, his stride confident and purposeful, a monarch in training. He was growing into his role, with each passing day gaining more of Meruem's qualities, the arrogance, the ambition, the sense of entitlement. Phaeton and Finks followed, their youthful expressions belying their lethal training. The two had a strange synergy. They were often at odds with each other, but there was a mutual respect that kept them tightly knit. Canary trailed behind, her watchful eyes never straying far from Haruto. Despite her youth, her loyalty was unwavering and her observational skills impeccable. As the day folded into night, the quartet retired to their rooms, each preparing for the mission ahead in their own way. Haruto sat in silent contemplation, his mind spinning webs of strategy. Phaeton, the quiet storm, was lost in his thoughts, his mind a battlefield of its own. Finks was busy with his physical preparations, not one to idle. Canary remained close to Haruto, her protective instincts never waning. The following day, they set off towards Dosu. The mission, despite its sinister undercurrent, was treated as just another test by the quartet. Their path was laden with anticipation, their spirits soaring high on the wings of their youthful audacity. "You've got that smirk again, Haruto," Finks noted, breaking the silence of their travel. His voice carried a teasing edge, a rare occurrence in their grim training. "Only when there's a good reason," Haruto replied, the corner of his mouth curling upward in his characteristic smirk. His eyes twinkled with a sense of amusement, his spirit untamed despite the weight of the task ahead. "Reason or not, it suits you," Finks said, the hint of a smirk on his own lips. He might have been the embodiment of toughness, but even he knew when to respect the audacity in others. The road to Dosu was as wild as the quartet itself, winding its way through thick forests and rugged hillsides, the landscape undisturbed by civilization. Every now and then, the kids caught a glimpse of wild creatures darting between the trees, a reminder of the world that existed outside their city. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of dew-laden leaves and damp earth, a stark contrast to the bustling city they were used to. Canary, her usually silent demeanor replaced by a protective alertness, kept her gaze glued on Haruto. Though he was hardly the biggest, he was the strongest, he carried himself with an air of majesty that demanded attention. Phaeton, on the other hand, seemed to be lost in thought. His mind was likely on the mission, figuring out the best approach to take down Kagan and his loyalists. There was a ruthless precision to Phaeton that was both frightening and admirable. His loyalty to Haruto was clear, but it was not born out of sentiment only. It was also born out of respect for Haruto's potential power, a silent acknowledgement of the king-like traits Haruto was slowly beginning to exhibit. At the outskirts of Dosu, atop a hill that overlooked the whole village, the quartet stood, waiting for Haruto's command. The young leader gazed at the village as though it were a game board laid out before him, his eyes calculating, sharp, and predatory. Each structure, every movement, and the patterns of life within the village were pieces in his mental game. He anticipated every possible move Kagan and his loyalists could make and planned to act before they even got the chance. Chapter 12. Pawns, Haruto murmured, his eyes on the village. His words, though spoken softly, carried in the still air. He pointed to a group of villagers working in the fields. "Canary, you see that man on the left? The one with the green headband?" Canary asked, her eyes moving to where Haruto was pointing. "That's him. He stands like a soldier, but works like a farmer. Likely, one of Kagan's loyalists in disguise." Canary nodded, making a mental note. Her role was not just to protect Haruto but also to support him in his strategies. Her gaze didn't leave the man Haruto had pointed out. Phaeton was quick to catch on. His eyes had already scanned the perimeter, taking note of the exits, potential threats, and vantage points. "Haruto, I see a guard at the entrance of the largest house. Probably Kagan's." "The king in his castle," Haruto smirked, his eyes focused on the building Phaeton was referring to. "And there are probably more hidden around." Finks huffed, cracking his knuckles. "Why waste time guessing? We should just rush them." Haruto's gaze remained unwavering. "No, Finks, we must outsmart them. This isn't about brute force." "Easy for you to say, Haruto," Finks grumbled, though his hands had already stilled at Haruto's words. "Patience, Finks," Phaeton's voice held a note of warning. His loyalty to Haruto didn't stem from blind faith but from respect for the strategy and foresight Haruto always displayed. The ruthlessness and the king-like demeanor he had started to exhibit seemed to him innate. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over Dosu. As darkness descended, the village was lit by the warm glow of lamps from the homes. It was a peaceful scene, one that would soon be disrupted by the quartet's actions. Haruto finally turned back from the village view, his face casting shadows. His eyes flickered between his companions. "Phaeton, you'll handle the man at the entrance. Finks, you're with me. We'll tackle the ones inside. Canary, keep an eye out for unexpected reinforcements. We act at midnight." No one questioned Haruto. His command was met with a nod from each of his companions, understanding reflected in their eyes. They knew their roles well, and each respected Haruto's decision-making ability. Canary was last to leave the hilltop, her gaze lingering on the peaceful village below. She was their silent observer, their shadow, a constant presence behind Haruto. As the day melted into night and the hour of their mission approached, tension filled the air. With the sunset painting the sky with hues of gold and red, Canary watched as the village of Dosi gradually surrendered itself to the inevitable twilight. Her heart beat with an unusual rhythm, one that was filled with both anticipation and an odd sense of trepidation. She was the youngest among them, yet her devotion to Haruto was profound and absolute. It was Haruto who had saved her when she was just 3, a toddler enslaved by a ruthless tyrant. He'd stormed the Horde's stronghold, freeing Canary and several others. However, amongst the liberated, Canary was the smallest, the most alone. Haruto took her under his wing, and she had been with him and Phaeton since. Canary owed her life to Haruto. He had rescued her from a world of chains and torment, a world that no child should ever experience. This bond, forged in the heat of such trauma, was unbreakable. He was not just her leader but also her savior, her mentor, her family. Canary knew she had to protect Haruto, not just out of duty, but out of gratitude and a deep-rooted love for the young king in the making. She watched as the lights of Dosu flickered on, her keen eyes scanning for any signs of threats, her mind anticipating Haruto's next command. Meanwhile, Finks, the embodiment of raw energy, was pacing restlessly. His muscles twitched, eager for action. Finks was a natural fighter, the adrenaline rush of combat something he craved. But under Haruto's leadership, he had learned to temper his aggression with strategy. "Are we moving or what?" Finks grumbled, his eyes scanning the path leading to the village. His impatience was palpable. Haruto shot him a sharp look, his young face set in an expression that was all too stern for his tender age. "We wait," he declared, his gaze shifting back to the village. Phaeton, his arms crossed over his chest, offered a rare smirk. His piercing eyes reflected the dying sunlight, the glow adding a touch of menace to his silent demeanor. The three of them stood in silence, a stark contrast to the lively hum of the village in the valley below. The tranquility of Dosu was deceptive, masking the tyranny that Kagan enforced with an iron fist. Finally, as the first stars began to pierce the velvety blanket of the night, Haruto's voice cut through the silence. "Canary, you keep watch from here. Alert us if you see anything unusual. Finks, you're with me. Phaeton, you take the main entrance." As Haruto detailed his plan, Canary felt a flutter of pride. He was younger than all of them, yet he held the reins of leadership with a firm hand. Canary saw in him the traits of the great king, the strategic mind, the calculated audacity, and the unbending will. Haruto and Finks disappeared into the shadows, leaving Canary and Phaeton behind. Phaeton stood still, his gaze fixated on the path that led to Kagan's presumed residence. His aura was intimidating, the anticipation for the upcoming confrontation clear in his posture. Canary watched as Phaeton set off, blending seamlessly into the darkness. She admired Phaeton's relentless drive, his complete trust in Haruto's command. His silent support and respect for Haruto was an example she aimed to follow. She felt a strong kinship with Phaeton. They had been together since their rescue, growing and learning under Haruto's leadership. Chapter 13. Phaeton and Haruto's relationship was complicated, entwined by a strange fusion of brotherhood and hierarchy. He found the infant Haruto in the crumpled ruins of a burned-out home in Meteor City. The infant's cries echoed through the rubble, and Phaeton, a mere toddler himself, stumbled upon the wailing baby. From that day on, he considered Haruto his brother, taking care of him with an almost parental instinct. Yet, as they grew, the dynamics subtly shifted. Phaeton, once the protector, found himself following Haruto, his natural gravitation toward leadership evident even in his infancy. There was a magnetism to Haruto that Phaeton could not ignore. A silent promise of greatness whispered through Haruto's every action and, in some strange way, Phaeton felt it was contagious. He could see their lives stretching out before them, intertwined in a destiny that would raise them above the rubble from which they came. Their bond was built on shared trauma and a common goal, survival. Yet, As Haruto began to exhibit traits of authority and majesty reminiscent of a legendary king, Phaeton found himself drawn into the whirlwind of Haruto's innate ambition. He didn't question Haruto's leadership, not out of a lack of understanding or ambition but because he saw in Haruto a reflection of his own aspirations. It wasn't blind faith that led Phaeton, it was a shared dream of overcoming their beginnings and making a mark on the world. As Phaeton disappeared into the darkness, leaving Canary to her watch, his mind whirled with the strategy Haruto had laid out. The village of Dose lay below them, seemingly peaceful under the soft glow of lamps and a blanket of stars, oblivious to the storm about to descend. Stepping into the shadowed path leading to the village, Haruto moved with calculated grace, his dark eyes gleaming with determination. Finks followed closely behind, his muscles coiled and ready to spring into action. Haruto's command echoed in his mind, stealth first, combat later. Kagen's residence, a pretentious structure looming at the heart of the village, was not far now. The two young infiltrators kept to the darker paths, carefully avoiding the sparse patrols of Kagen's henchmen. As they neared, they could sense the presence of two distinct Nen users, a warning of the resistance they were about to face. Haruto signaled to Finks to halt with a swift hand gesture. Wait. The aura is stronger here. Two Nen users. We need to proceed with caution. Finks frowned, his instinct to rush headlong into battle at odds with Haruto's calculated approach. However, he held his ground. Haruto's leadership was not to be questioned. He had proven his strategic acuity time and time again, often saving their lives in the process. As Haruto slowly led the way, they could sense the two Nen users more distinctly. They were indeed inside Kagen's residence, their auras swirling in a turbulent mix of anticipation and readiness. Haruto knew they were aware of the impending attack. Without exchanging words, Haruto and Finks slipped into the manor, the silent shadows their accomplices. The dimly lit halls echoed with the soft hum of their target's Nen, its intensity sending a clear signal, they were ready. Suddenly, two figures appeared from the darkness. A tall man, his aura bristling with a chill akin to a winter gale, and a shorter woman, her aura seething with the intensity of a wildfire. They were Kagen's Nen protectors. Who dares to infiltrate our master's abode? The woman's voice echoed menacingly through the hall. Haruto stepped forward, his gaze as firm as steel. We are here for Kagen. Stand aside, or you will be eliminated. His warning was met with cruel laughter. The man stepped forward, an icy wind seeming to accompany his movement. Eliminated, you say? He smirked, his aura intensifying. I'd like to see you try, brats. Without any further provocation, the battle commenced. Finks lunged at the woman, his aura flaring up. His fists hammered through the air, each strike a blur of power and speed. The woman nimbly dodged his blows, her fiery aura crackling as she retaliated with swift, lethal strikes. Meanwhile, Haruto engaged the man. His aura was a quiet storm, a manifestation of his calm yet deadly determination. Every move he made was precise, every strike aimed to incapacitate his opponent. Despite the disparity in their ages and experiences, Haruto held his ground, his determination unwavering. As Finks squared off against the woman, he felt a surge of adrenaline. She had a fierce aura around her, intimidating despite her petite size. Finks, who was more muscle than finesse, squared his shoulders and charged at her. He swung his fist, expecting it to land solidly against her body, but she moved with a swift, cat-like grace, easily sidestepping his punch. His fist hit nothing but air. Before he could recover, she was already attacking. Her movements were a sharp contrast to his. Where he was strength and brute force, she was agility and precision. Ha, not as easy as you thought? Her voice was a low, mocking purr as she dodged another punch from Finks, countering with a rapid flurry of hits that sent him stumbling backwards. Finks grunted in frustration. He was not used to being on the back foot, especially against an opponent who, on first glance, seemed so much less formidable than him. But he underestimated the strength that Nen could provide. Her every move was enhanced, her strikes carrying an additional force that Finks struggled to counter. In his peripheral vision, Finks saw Haruto trading blows with the tall man. Their battle seemed equally intense, the air around them crackling with their combined auras. But he couldn't afford to be distracted. The woman was not giving him any room to breathe, let alone observe. "Keep up, little boy." Her taunting words were accompanied by a swift roundhouse kick, which Finks narrowly managed to block. Finks responded with a growl, his anger flaring. He hated being underestimated and mocked. He rushed at her, trying to use his superior size and strength to his advantage. However, every punch he threw, she evaded with a graceful twist or turn, making him feel clumsy and slow in comparison. Chapter 14. This was not a typical brawl, where his brute strength could easily overpower his opponents. The woman was a skilled nen user, her body enhanced with an energy that Finks could not compete with. He was panting heavily, his muscles straining with the effort of keeping up with her. "You're all brawn and no brains," she taunted, her words punctuated by a sharp punch to his stomach. Doubling over from the blow, Finks spat out a retort, "And you're all talk, lady." Finks's anger erupted like a raging wildfire, his muscles straining as he retaliated. He could not use nen, but that didn't mean he couldn't fight. He fell back on his other training, rhythmic echo and shadow steps, techniques that focused on footwork and timing. He attempted to create an illusion of his movement, echoing his previous position while launching himself at her from another angle. "Let's see how you handle this," Finks growled, his voice echoing through the hall. His form shimmered, his movements too fast for the naked eye to follow. The woman hesitated, her eyes trying to keep up with his rapid movement. Finks saw an opening and threw a punch, but she nimbly sidestepped, her body flickering with the intensity of her nen. He felt the air swoosh past his fist, a harsh reminder of the difference in their abilities. Finks was strong, but this woman, this nen user, was on another level. His mind raced, thoughts tumbling over one another in a desperate search for a solution. He needed a new tactic, a new strategy. He needed to remember everything Koshiro had drilled into him during their arduous training sessions. Meanwhile, Haruto and his opponent clashed, their battle echoing through the halls of Kagen's residence. Their movements were fluid and coordinated, like a deadly dance. Haruto was holding his own, his king-like demeanor emanating with every move he made. Finks stole a glance at Haruto, a grimace etched on his face. He couldn't afford to lose. Not here, not now. He couldn't let Haruto down. He breathed in deeply, centering his mind. His training with Koshiro flickered in his memory. He focused on the echoes of Koshiro's advice: exploit weaknesses, anticipate movements, use the environment. These were things Finks could do, even without nen. His eyes flicked around the room, taking in the pillars, the grand staircase, the decorative hangings on the wall. He quickly formulated a plan. He had to be faster, smarter. Finks shifted his footing, launching into a series of shadow steps, his body moving in an unpredictable pattern. His rapid movement forced the woman to retreat, creating space for him to maneuver. "Stand still, you irritating boy," she spat, her frustration evident. Finks just smirked. "What's wrong, lady? Can't keep up?" Finks felt a surge of satisfaction at her evident annoyance. His taunts seemed to be working, drawing her focus away from their battle. He needed to keep her off balance, to take the offensive. Finks advanced, his movements a blur. He darted around the woman, his every action calculated to confuse and bewilder her. She swung at him, her aura flaring, but he dodged, his form flickering between one position and another. Suddenly, he launched himself at a nearby pillar, using it to propel himself forward with more force. His fist connected with her side, sending her stumbling back. A triumphant grin spread across Finks's face. His strategy was working. However, the woman recovered quickly. She spun around, her aura swirling around her like a flame. Finks felt a chill run down his spine. This was not over, not by a long shot. She charged at him, her aura flaring. Finks tried to dodge, but he wasn't quick enough. A punch landed on his chest, knocking the wind out of him. Meanwhile, Haruto engaged the man. His aura was a quiet storm, a manifestation of his calm yet deadly determination. Every move he made was precise, every strike aimed to incapacitate his opponent. Despite the disparity in their ages and experiences, Haruto held his ground, his determination unwavering. The grand hall of Kagen's residence echoed with the rising crescendo of battle. The nen-imbued protectors moved like specters, their auras blazing with fierce intensity. Haruto and Finks moved in sync, their determination matched only by their audacity. For Haruto, the battlefield was not just a war zone but a vast game board. The nen users were chess pieces, moving strategically, exploiting every possible advantage. Haruto, however, was not a pawn on the board, but the player maneuvering the pieces. This perspective, this calculated detachment, was his strength. Despite his young age, Haruto was remarkably adept at quickly assessing the situation. He saw patterns in the chaos, identified strengths and weaknesses, and exploited them with the precision of a seasoned tactician. Even without using nen, he was formidable. "Underestimate me at your peril," he warned, his voice echoing through the hall. The older nen user, his aura rippling around him, sneered at Haruto's statement. "You're just a child, you stand no chance." He lunged, his fist swinging toward Haruto in a devastating arc. The older man was fast, but Haruto was faster. He sidestepped the attack, closing in on his opponent's flank. His agile movement, a blur to the untrained eye, spoke volumes about his combat proficiency. "You speak too much," Haruto retorted, striking back. His fists moved in a series of swift jabs, each strike calculated to bring his adversary down. "You're just a brat," the man repeated, seething with frustration as he attempted to strike Haruto once more. The king-like demeanor of the young boy in front of him, paired with the daunting reality of his swiftly deteriorating position, was causing his temper to flare. He swung his aura about him in a desperate attempt to gain the upper hand, but Haruto's agility and keen perception kept him one step ahead. "Child or not, I'm your adversary," Haruto retorted, effortlessly dodging another reckless lunge. He allowed himself a fleeting smirk, his calmness contrasting sharply with the man's mounting agitation. The man's brows knitted, the room turning more intense with every passing second. Silence. "You won't be smirking for long." Chapter 15. Haruto found amusement in his opponent's outbursts. His lips quirked up, a glimpse of arrogance surfacing. "Interesting. I always thought nen users were supposed to be composed." "I'll show you composed," the man growled, lunging towards Haruto with his fist wreathed in furious nen. Haruto danced away, nimbly avoiding the enraged man's assault. He was akin to a shadow, the echo of his movements lingering just long enough to mislead his opponent, only to appear elsewhere in the next breath. His boyish frame was deceptively agile, a surprising grace lending elegance to his evasion. "I didn't come here to engage in idle talk," Haruto declared, closing the distance once again. He was quick as a flash, darting forward and aiming a series of precise strikes at his adversary's exposed flank. Caught off guard, the man attempted to spin around, to shield himself from Haruto's assault. But Haruto was faster, landing a swift kick that sent the man sprawling on the floor. The man was back on his feet in an instant, a fresh surge of aura coating his body. "Insolent brat. Your stance is off," Haruto said, his voice even. He circled his opponent, eyes narrowing slightly at the pattern of the man's aura. He might not be able to use nen yet, but he had a keen sense for it, for its rhythm and flow. The man, however, was becoming more and more agitated by Haruto's cool composure. His aura spiked and swirled unpredictably, like a storm threatening to burst its banks. "What would you know?" the man snapped, lunging at Haruto with a grunt of effort. Haruto easily sidestepped the attack, a wisp of a smirk playing on his lips. Quite a lot, it would seem. His voice, level and composed, was a stark contrast to the older man's increasing frustration. The man charged at him again, each attack growing wilder than the last. But Haruto was unfazed. He saw the battlefield as a chessboard, each move made by his opponent a piece in a grand strategy. Except that his adversary's moves were becoming more and more desperate, his strategy unraveling. Predictable, Haruto said, evading another punch. He had studied his adversary's movements, his strategy, his weaknesses. Each attack thrown at him was not a threat, but an opportunity. Shut up. The man's aura flared, his control slipping. You're just a child, you have no right. But Haruto was already on the move. He ducked under the man's wild punch, darting to the side and landing a quick jab at his opponent's exposed side. The man stumbled, a grunt of surprise and pain escaping him. Haruto didn't wait for his opponent to recover. Rights have nothing to do with it. He struck again, targeting the man's weak points with unerring precision. Each move was calculated, his target clear. Stop mocking me. The man seethed, his aura spiraling out of control. Stop making it so easy, Haruto retorted, a spark of challenge in his eyes. He danced around the man, drawing him further into the open, away from any potential cover. Haruto's sharp wit, his boyish arrogance, and his unyielding determination, all were reminiscent of the king-like aura he seemed to embody. It was as if he saw himself not as a player on the board but as the one controlling the game. Even without Nen, his presence was formidable. The man's anger bubbled over, his aura flaring out in a chaotic burst of energy. I'll crush you. Haruto merely grinned at the threat, his eyes glinting in anticipation. He moved with grace, avoiding the man's desperate lunges with ease. Your actions speak louder than your words, he said, his voice calm as he countered the man's reckless assault. No more games. The man roared, gathering his energy for a direct attack. Haruto met his gaze head-on, his eyes glowing with steely resolve. Oh, I assure you, he said, I am quite bored of it already. Haruto's eyes flickered to Finks, gauging the progress of his battle. The burly boy was engaged in a whirlwind of movement against the fiery woman, his powerful blows causing the air to shudder. Even as Finks was being pushed back, a triumphant grin was plastered across his face. The boy thrived on the challenge, his muscles straining against the force of the Nen user's attacks. Haruto took in the scene with the keen awareness of a chess master surveying the game board. A strategic idea sparked in his mind, one that required impeccable timing and skillful maneuvering. Finks, change of plan. Haruto called out, his voice cutting through the cacophony of battle. The brawl in the room seemed to still for a moment as Finks's focus shifted, eyeing Haruto with newfound interest. The plan was fine, Finks grumbled back, dodging a blazing swipe from the woman. No more brute force. Draw her out, Haruto instructed, his gaze not leaving the irate man in front of him. As Finks skillfully began to retreat, drawing the woman away from his own fight, Haruto returned his attention to his own opponent. His mind was racing, each second bringing him closer to the moment of execution. Hiding behind your friend now, are you? The man sneered, gathering his energy for a powerful attack. Is that fear I hear? Haruto retorted, meeting his opponent's gaze with a smirk. The man's face twisted in rage, his hand glowing with swirling Nen. I'll show you fear. But Haruto was already moving, positioning himself strategically between his opponent and Finks's adversary. As the man charged forward, Haruto nimbly sidestepped, leaving nothing but open air between the man's deadly punch and the woman's unsuspecting form. The man's attack found a new target. Caught off guard and completely unsuspecting, the woman turned just in time to meet the full brunt of the man's ferocious strike. The force of the blow was so immense that it caved in her skull, spraying blood and bits of bone across the marble floor. The hall fell into an eerie silence as the woman's lifeless body crumpled to the ground. The man stood frozen in disbelief, his fist still extended, dripping with the woman's blood. A cacophonous ringing echoed through the space, amplifying the shock of what had just occurred. Chapter 16. Was that part of your plan? Finks asked as he got up after being punched by the woman, his voice filled with both horror and fascination. He kicked away the fallen woman's corpse, looking at Haruto with newfound respect. That was brutal. Adaptation is key in battle, Finks. The strategy was indeed fine, but the execution could have been improved. Haruto turned to the man, his eyes cold. You should have paid attention to your surroundings. Your anger blinded you. In contrast to Haruto's calm composure, the man was visibly shaken. He was staring at his own bloodied hand, as if seeing it for the first time. I didn't mean to. Your actions have consequences, Haruto said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. Now you face the consequence of underestimating us. I should have killed you when I had the chance, the man stammered, his voice choked with regret and fear. You're right, Haruto replied, his voice devoid of empathy. You should have. Before the man could regain his composure, Haruto was already moving. He moved like a shadow, his small form darting forward with an uncanny grace. His fingers curved, transforming into sharp, lethal claws. A look of absolute horror passed over the man's face as Haruto neared him. He tried to pull away, to mount some sort of defense, but it was too late. Haruto's claws cut through the air, tearing open the man's chest with a horrifying ease. The man choked on a scream, his eyes bulging as he stared down at his chest. He was looking at his own heart, held by Haruto's bloodied claw, still beating its last few beats. Blood welled up around the gaping wound, pouring out in a crimson flood. He fell to his knees, the strength leaving his body as quickly as his lifeblood drained away. In the next breath, he collapsed on the ground, his body convulsing once before falling eerily still. The silence that followed was deafening, only broken by the steady drip of blood falling onto the marble floor. The fallen bodies of the Nen users served as chilling testament to the grim resolve of the young combatants. The dust settled, revealing Haruto standing amidst the carnage, his aura rippling with latent power. Finks, still sporting a grin, joined him, with Phaeton and Canary falling in line shortly after. All three looked at Haruto expectantly. Canary's eyes held a profound trust, something that Haruto didn't fail to notice. Their objective was clear, as set by their aged mentor, Koshiro. The task was to deal with Kagen. Deal. The word hung in the air, its meaning as fluid as it was merciless. Haruto had his interpretation, and it was not going to be pretty for the village tyrant. Their path led them to Kagen's room, a walk filled with anticipation. Haruto's mind was already spinning a strategy, laying out the perfect checkmate. The plan was simple: bring Kagen to the center of the village and present him to the villagers. It was time they met the beast that had shackled them for years. Yet, Haruto's plan held a subtle test for these oppressed people. He held a firm belief, those incapable of fighting for their own freedom didn't deserve it. This confrontation would either ignite the fire of rebellion within them, or confirm their acceptance of a life of servitude. As they neared Kagen's room, Haruto's gaze hardened, and the others took notice. "This is it," he said, his voice steady and resonant. "Remember, don't kill him. Not yet." Phaeton snorted. "You want to play with him first?" Haruto met his gaze, the hint of a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Consider it an educational experiment." Finks chuckled, his muscles twitching in anticipation. "Sure, as long as I get to hit him a bit." "You all will," Haruto responded confidently, the glow in his eyes intensifying. Canary glanced at Haruto, her expression unchanging, yet her respect for him deepening. "If it helps the villagers stand against Kagen, I'll follow your lead." Haruto nodded, appreciating her dedication. To the young king in the making, loyalty was paramount, and his companion's unwavering faith was an asset he intended to harness. His aura radiated an innate majesty, a kingly vibe that further solidified his leadership. As they continued their march towards Kagen's room, a strange calmness blanketed the group, their minds filled with thoughts of the impending confrontation. Haruto's conviction, Phaeton's irritation, Finks's anticipation, and Canary's trust painted a vivid picture of the brutal justice about to be delivered. With Kagen beaten and bound, Haruto and the others dragged him to the village center. It was almost dusk, and the village square was illuminated by the soft glow of torchlight. The sight of their once mighty oppressor now humbled and vulnerable elicited a wave of disbelief among the villagers, their eyes widening in shocked silence. Nestled in the shadows, Haruto watched the scene unfold. His sharp eyes observed every gesture, every flinch, Every fearful glance exchanged between the villagers. This was an opportunity for him, an opportunity to understand the true nature of the human heart, to experiment, to play this game. He was the conductor, and the village was his orchestra. Every moment, every reaction was part of the symphony he was composing. Canary was next to him, her trust in Haruto unwavering. She followed his gaze, her focus equally locked on the villagers' reaction. Phaeton and Finks were close by, their patience thinning as they waited for the villagers to make their move. "This is taking too long," Phaeton growled, his anger simmering beneath his cold exterior. "These weaklings can't even see their chance." "Hush, Phaeton," Haruto whispered without breaking his gaze from the scene, his voice a commanding whisper. "This is their moment, not ours." Chapter 17. Meanwhile, Kagan, struggling against his restraints, cast a look of pure hatred at the villagers. "Pathetic worms. You think this changes anything?" he spat. However, his words fell on deaf ears as the villagers began to muster their courage. "Let's just rip him apart," Finks chimed in, barely concealing his excitement at the thought of the violent end. Haruto shot him a look, silencing him instantly. "Watch. Learn. This is not just about physical strength. This," he gestured towards the villagers, "is about the power of the spirit." In that moment, something changed. A villager, a young man, stepped forward, his fists clenched. "He's weak now," he said, his voice echoing in the square. "We've been his slaves for too long. If we won't fight now, when will we?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, then another villager joined him, and another. Slowly, but surely, they stepped forward, their faces hardened with resolve. Haruto allowed a small smile, his golden eyes gleaming in the shadow. He turned towards Canary, who watched the scene with bated breath. "See? Even the meekest of creatures will fight when pushed to the edge." The conversation among the children took a pause as they watched the villagers descend upon Kagan. The once feared tyrant was now on the receiving end of years of pent-up rage and humiliation. The square echoed with cries of justice and revenge as the villagers served their own verdict. As Kagan's pleas for mercy were drowned out by the villagers' enraged cries, Haruto turned to the others. "This is our world," he said, his voice filled with an unspoken ambition. "A world where the strong rule and the weak perish. Or they rise." In the shadows, Koshiro watched the young ones, his gaze lingering on Haruto. The boy was learning, adapting, and leading. His vision of the world was different, and in that difference, Koshiro saw a spark that could very well ignite the future of Meteor City. "Finks. Phaeton. Canary," Haruto's voice cut through the grim ambience, "let's go. Our work here is done." The brutal symphony had reached its crescendo, and the conductor had left the stage. The village square was bathed in an eerie light, reflecting the harsh reality of survival and retribution. The once frightened and oppressed villagers had seized their moment, rising against their tormentor. As they walked away, Haruto could hear the echoes of a new chapter for the village. The grim melody of revolt was something he found intriguing, a testament to the unpredictability and ruthlessness of human nature. From a distance, Canary glanced back at the village square, her mind reeling from what she had just witnessed. The villagers had turned, their actions driven by years of oppression and a sudden opportunity. Her gaze then shifted to Haruto, his back turned to the chaos he had set into motion. She saw in him a leader, someone who manipulated situations with an uncanny understanding of human behavior. Phaeton walked silently, his face stoic as always, but there was a newfound respect in his eyes for Haruto. He appreciated the ruthless display of power dynamics and the hands-off approach that Haruto had implemented, allowing the villagers to enact their own justice. Finks too had been fascinated by the scene they had just left behind, but for a different reason. The raw power of the crowd, their violent unity against a common enemy, intrigued him. He had always enjoyed a good fight, but watching the oppressed rise had introduced him to a new side of combat, the side where psychological strength could triumph over physical prowess. Koshiro, their mentor, watched them silently. His aged eyes held a hint of pride as he saw the seeds of wisdom sprouting in the young minds. Their journey had only just begun, and already, they were showing signs of profound understanding of their world. They had faced their first real test, and they had not just passed, but excelled. As they silently retreated into the night, leaving the village to its newfound liberation, they all carried with them a stark reminder of the world they lived in. A world where strength ruled, where power dynamics shifted quickly, and where survival meant adapting, no matter the cost. Haruto led them away, his youthful figure cast in the soft moonlight, his mind teeming with thoughts. He looked at his hand, smeared with the dried blood of his opponents, a symbol of his own ruthlessness and power. His gaze then shifted to his companions, each wrapped in their own thoughts, each carrying their lessons from the day. Their journey was just beginning, their destinies intertwined in this harsh world, their path paved by strength, ambition, and an innate desire to survive. As Haruto mused, one thing became crystal clear. He was meant for more. More power, more control, more conquests. He was the king of this world. And this was just the beginning. Chapter 18. The ensuing years were nothing short of transformative for the youthful group. Under Koshiro's experienced guidance, they engaged in missions, facing challenges that honed their minds and bodies. They grew, not just in physical stature, but in maturity, their bond strengthening with every shared adventure. Haruto, who was only 8 when they faced Kagan, had now reached his 10th year. His journey was akin to a river gaining momentum, carving its path through a mountain. His latent majesty, inherited from Meruem, bloomed with every passing day. The young boy, once merely sharp-witted, had begun exuding a unique charisma, solidifying his position as the group's natural leader. Phaeton and Finks, now teenagers, had seen significant progress in their own right. The harsh, ruthless streak in Phaeton was more pronounced, his thirst for battle as unquenchable as ever. Finks, on the other hand, reveled in the camaraderie, his bond with the group almost fraternal. Though both distinct in character, their loyalty to Haruto was unquestionable. Canary, the youngest, had matured considerably. Her unwavering trust in Haruto had evolved into deep respect. A silent observer, her eyes held a light that promised unparalleled dedication to their shared cause. In those 2 years, their missions were as varied as they were challenging. From infiltrating high-security compounds to helping oppressed communities rise against their tyrants, they embraced every task with a shared determination. Yet, despite their shared battles, their nen training was yet to commence. Koshiro had been cryptic about it, promising to initiate them when the time was right. Their journey wasn't without its fair share of disagreements and tensions. One such argument unfolded as they returned from a mission. "You're being too careless, Finks," Phaeton spat, his voice cold. "Your bravado almost cost us the mission." Finks laughed it off, his grin nonchalant. "Oh, come on. That explosion was way off. We were never in any danger." "Maybe we weren't," Haruto interjected, his tone neutral. "But that's not the point, Finks. We need to be precise in our actions. Even the slightest miscalculation can have catastrophic consequences." Finks rolled his eyes. "Not every mission requires a calculated approach. Sometimes, you just have to go with your gut." Canary, who had been silently trailing behind them, suddenly spoke up. "I agree with Haruto," she stated, her voice steady. "We need to minimize unnecessary risks." Finks threw his hands up, an exaggerated sigh escaping his lips. "Fine, fine. I'll try to be more precise." That argument was one among many. However, they served a purpose, shaping them into a cohesive unit, their individual traits meshing together to form an unstoppable force. As they continued their journey, the children, led by the young king-to-be Haruto, became a force to reckon with. Through every mission, every argument, every victory, and every setback, they grew stronger. They learned to trust one another, their bond strengthening with every challenge they overcame. As they stepped into the threshold of their teens, they remained a sight to behold, children in appearance, but warriors in spirit. Meanwhile, Haruto was growing into his role as the group's leader. His wisdom, at such a young age, was remarkable. He dealt with the group's dynamics deftly, maneuvering their distinct personalities with an ease that belied his age. His leadership, firm yet empathetic, left no room for doubt. Haruto was born to be a king. "Today is the day," Koshiro announced, his voice echoing in the spacious room where they had gathered. The grand old man was a figure of authority, his words carried the weight of decades spent as a part of the council of Meteor City. In his aged eyes, a spark ignited at the prospect of what was to come. The announcement was met with a spectrum of reactions. Haruto stood silent, the anticipation etched across his face. Canary's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and excitement swirling within them. Finks cracked his knuckles, a grin spreading across his face, while Phaeton stood motionless, his eyes betraying his eagerness. The air in the room tensed, their young hearts pounding in anticipation. They were about to cross a threshold that would forever change their lives. It was the moment they had been waiting for, their Nen awakening. Haruto's mind raced, his eyes meeting Koshiro's with a sense of resolve. In the past 2 years, his king-like attributes had only grown stronger, his innate majesty amplified with each mission. Today, this majesty would be fortified by an unseen power, the mystical force of Nen. Koshiro moved with a profound purpose, his aged hand reaching out to Haruto. He was the first. The old man's palm gently pressed against Haruto's chest, the air around them pulsating with a latent energy. Without warning, a sudden surge erupted, Koshiro channeling his Nen into the young boy. Haruto's eyes widened as a sensation unlike anything he had ever experienced coursed through his body. It felt like a dam had been broken within him, a torrent of powerful energy unleashed, setting his nerves ablaze. His body trembled, but he stood his ground, his eyes defiant. This was his destiny. He welcomed the pain, the overwhelming force. It was an affirmation of his future, of his right to rule. Once the surge subsided, Haruto stumbled back, his chest heaving. He looked at his hands, a sense of newfound power coursing through his veins. He looked at Koshiro, gratitude flashing in his eyes. "Bravo," Koshiro nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "You took it well, Haruto." He then turned his attention to Phaeton, his gaze firm. The usually impetuous Phaeton steeled himself, bracing for the impact. As Koshiro's palm made contact, Phaeton's body convulsed, the influx of energy proving too much for him to bear. Yet, his eyes remained locked onto Koshiro's, his determination unwavering. After a grueling moment, Koshiro withdrew his hand, leaving Phaeton panting, his body slumped on the floor. Phaeton's eyes glinted, a feral satisfaction radiating from them as he took in his awakened Nen. Next was Finks. He approached the ordeal with a light-hearted grin, but the moment Koshiro's hand made contact, his smile vanished. His muscles bulged under the strain of the energy surge, his body buckling under the impact. Yet, he too stood his ground, his grit transcending the pain. Canary was last. Her gaze fell on Haruto, seeking reassurance. Haruto nodded, encouraging her forward. As Koshiro's Nen surged into her, Canary gritted her teeth, her body shuddering under the intense force. It was painful, but she remained rooted, fueled by her trust in Haruto and Koshiro. Chapter 19. With the Nen awakening, the 4 young ones stood at the brink of a precipice, their life force roaring and crackling around them like wildfire. The once invisible energy was now tangible, wrapping around them, pulsating with a raw intensity that was almost blinding. This fire of life was unruly, threatening to consume them if left unchecked. "Enough excitement for one day," Koshiro commanded, his voice cutting through the electric air. "Sit and meditate. Learn to control your life force. This energy you feel is like a double-edged sword, it can empower you or it can annihilate you. Now, harness it." Haruto, his body vibrating with the newfound energy, lowered himself to the ground, a storm brewing in his gaze. Unlike the others, he didn't merely request his life force to comply, he demanded. That was Haruto's arrogance, his innate sense of superiority that came from the lineage of Meruem. He didn't plead, he took what was rightfully his. In the silent battle that unfolded within him, Haruto's life force was akin to a defiant beast, rearing its head, challenging its newfound master. It whirled around him like a tempest, threatening to rip him apart. Yet, Haruto stood his ground. His gaze was a sea of resolve, his jaw set with determination. His life force, wild and violent, taunted him with its untamed force. It surged and ebbed within him, lashing out at his will. Yet, his resolve didn't falter. A silent tug-of-war ensued, a battle between an untamed force and an indomitable will. "I won't let you consume me," Haruto muttered to himself, his fingers digging into the floor. The battle with his life force was akin to taming a wild beast. His nen roared and thrashed, its raw energy trying to escape his body. Yet, Haruto refused to be overpowered. Slowly, with the patience of a king dealing with a defiant subject, Haruto started reining in his nen. His will acted like a chain, pulling the wild energy back, forcing it to comply. The defiant life force fought back, but it wasn't enough to overpower Haruto's determination. He was a king in the making, after all. His command was absolute, his authority unchallenged. As he continued his inner struggle, Haruto wasn't alone. Phaeton, Sphinx, and Canary, each engaged in their own battle, trying to harness the unruly force within them. The room was silent, save for their harsh breaths, yet the air thrummed with the power of their unleashed nen. "I don't know about you guys," Sphinx grunted, breaking the silence. "But this is harder than any physical training we've ever done." Phaeton shot him a glare. "Shut up, Sphinx. Concentrate." Meanwhile, Canary stayed silent, her eyes closed in concentration. Her small body trembled, but there was a determined set to her shoulders. In Haruto's inner world, the struggle was no less relentless than a tempestuous storm. His nen, once a chaotic maelstrom, gradually transformed into a docile current under the unwavering determination of its master. At first, it resisted him, but as time passed, it began to adapt to his command, its raw energy conforming to his will. It no longer surged uncontrollably but danced around Haruto, trying to please him, like a loyal hound awaiting his orders. "It's like a pet," Haruto murmured, his voice filled with fascination and a touch of amusement. His nen swirled around his leg, seemingly eager to follow his command. Stubborn, but trainable. The others glanced at him, their faces etched with exhaustion. Koshiro merely watched, a twinkle in his old eyes. There was a tinge of admiration for the young boy who had so quickly and naturally started taming his nen. "Sphinx, are you even trying?" Phaeton spat out in frustration, his eyes narrowed at his fellow trainee. "Your energy is all over the place." "I could say the same about you," Sphinx retorted, grinning despite the sweat trickling down his forehead. "Look at yourself. You're trembling more than Canary." Canary merely rolled her eyes at the two bickering boys, opting to stay silent. Unlike them, she was focusing all her attention on taming her nen, her face flushed with determination. Her nen whirled around her, initially tumultuous but gradually simmering down under her concentration. As their banter continued, Haruto's voice cut through the cacophony. "Stop bickering. Focus on controlling your nen." His tone, firm and authoritative, echoed around the room. Despite his youth, there was an undeniable majesty in his voice, reminding them of their mission and purpose. Sphinx and Phaeton shared a glance but didn't retort. Instead, they nodded, redirecting their attention to their individual struggles. "Haruto is right," Koshiro added, his voice filled with wisdom earned over years of experience. "Nen is not just power, it's a reflection of yourself. Control it, shape it, let it be your strength. The more you fight it, the harder it will resist." As the sun set, painting the room in hues of orange and red, the group continued to train, their resolve unyielding. Hours rolled into days, and days into weeks. Under Koshiro's watchful gaze, they delved deeper into their training, learning to control and direct their nen. Despite their distinct personalities, their shared goal was a binding force. Haruto, with his growing majesty and natural leadership, led them forward, often setting an example with his rapid progress. Phaeton, ruthless and headstrong, followed closely, his persistence in mastering his nen as fierce as his combative nature. Sphinx, with his lighter approach, often added levity to their grueling training, his easygoing nature contrasting his intense determination. And Canary, the youngest, silently observed and learned, her respect for Haruto deepening with each passing day. In the midst of their chaotic training, they learned to communicate without words, their movements syncing as they worked on taming their nen. It was a sight to behold, four distinct characters bound by a shared goal, led by a king in the making, guided by an old, wise mentor. The power they harbored promised greatness, and with each passing day, they took one step closer to realizing their potential. Chapter 20. The next day, the training hall was steeped in a focused silence, the air pulsating with the controlled energy of the newly awakened nen users. The four young warriors sat cross-legged, eyes closed, their nen flowing around them like ethereal auras. They had managed to keep their energy from wildly seeping out, a testament to their relentless training and sheer determination. Koshiro, standing at the room's center, nodded approvingly. His voice broke the silence, resonating with decades of wisdom and authority. Good. You've managed to contain your nen. Now, the real training begins. All eyes were on him as he began to discuss the fundamentals of nen, the mystical life energy that resided within them. Nen is divided into four basic abilities: Ten, Zetsu, Ren, and Hatsu. You've been unknowingly practicing Ten, which involves creating a shroud around your body to prevent your nen from leaking out. Next is Zetsu, he continued, his gaze intense. It involves shutting off your own aura completely. Doing so makes you invisible to other nen users and allows you to recharge your own nen. But be warned, using Zetsu leaves you vulnerable to physical and nen attacks. As he talked, Haruto's expression was intense, his eyes reflecting an insatiable hunger for knowledge. His mind was a sponge, soaking up every word Koshiro spoke, analyzing, and storing them for future use. His inherent kingly traits, his natural command and charisma, were now being bolstered by knowledge and wisdom. Koshiro moved on to Ren. This technique involves increasing your nen flow. It enhances your physical strength and durability and is key to powerful nen attacks. But remember, higher nen flow means faster exhaustion. You need to learn to balance it. Phaeton's eyes glowed at the mention of enhanced physical strength, a wicked grin spreading across his face. The idea of possessing such power excited him. His ruthless nature was drawn to anything that promised greater strength and dominance. Haruto noticed this and smirked, amused by Phaeton's predictability. Finally, Koshiro introduced Hatsu. Hatsu is the culmination of your nen practice. It's your personal expression of nen, unique to you and you alone. Your Hatsu will reflect your personality, your desires, and your goals. Remember, the journey towards mastery in nen is not a sprint, but a marathon, Koshiro said, leaning against a wooden pole, his gaze scrutinizing his young pupils. Hatsu may seem exciting, but it is the highest pinnacle of nen control. You will reach it in due course. For now, let us focus on mastering Ten, Zetsu, and Ren. His words, steeped in wisdom, resonated in the silent training hall. Haruto, the youngest of the four, with his body still thrumming with the energy of his freshly awakened nen, nodded. His eyes were sharp, mirroring Koshiro's intense gaze. Let's start with Zetsu, Koshiro commanded, folding his arms over his chest. Shut off your nen completely. Make it seem as though you've vanished. Surprisingly, as the young ones concentrated on concealing their nen, the energy swirling around them receded. The vibrant aura that once surrounded them disappeared, replaced by an eerie silence. Koshiro observed, a hint of surprise creasing his weathered face. Good, he mumbled, the skills you've honed as assassins have paid off. Finks, ever the talkative one, chuckled. Hiding is our second nature. Seems our previous training wasn't entirely useless, eh? Phaeton shot him a glare, before turning to Koshiro. We've done it. What's next? Ren, the old man said, pointing to the space in front of him. Aim to increase your nen flow. Envision your energy amplifying. As they grappled with this new task, their nen flickered back to life, wild and untamed. They struggled to control the surge, their bodies trembling under the onslaught of their own power. But despite the struggle, there was a stubbornness in their eyes. They wouldn't back down. "Ren, this is the essence of our strength, isn't it?" Phaeton muttered, his words dripping with newfound understanding. His eyes were sharp, a wicked grin pulling at his lips as he felt the surge of energy within him. He was a fighter through and through, and the promise of amplified strength excited him. Meanwhile, Haruto was silent, deep in concentration. His energy was stirring, responding to his demand. As his nen grew stronger, it didn't become a chaotic tempest like before but remained a controlled inferno. His command over his nen was growing, much like his latent kingly aura. "Control it," Koshiro barked, snapping them out of their internal struggle. "Remember, this is a part of you. Do not let it overpower you. Command it." "I'm trying," Finks grumbled, beads of sweat trickling down his face. The strain was evident on his face, but there was a gleam of determination in his eyes. He wouldn't back down, not yet. Amidst their struggles, Canary was remarkably silent. She sat cross-legged, her face pinched with concentration. Her energy whirled around her, tumultuous and stormy, but she held her ground. Her focus was unwavering. Days rolled into weeks, with their time in the training hall dedicated to mastering Ren. Every morning, as the sun's first rays bathed the room, Koshiro would command them to activate Ren and increase their nen flow. The goal was simple: sustain the surge longer each time. Haruto, with his royal lineage, was the first to grasp the essence of Ren. His gaze held an unyielding resolve as he focused his energy, refusing to let it overpower him. He would sit in silent determination, his nen dancing around him like a controlled firestorm. Phaeton, with his inherent fierceness, took to the practice like a moth to a flame. The idea of strength and power fascinated him. "This," he had declared one day, a hint of a cruel grin playing on his lips, "is what I'm made for." His nen was like a fierce beast, growling and snapping, but under his command. Chapter 21. The training was brutal. They pushed their limits, their bodies straining under the weight of their own power. Their nen would ebb and flow, sometimes threatening to overpower them. But under Koshiro's watchful eyes and stern guidance, they gradually started gaining control. They learned to push the boundaries, to extend their limits, and in the process, became stronger. Again, Koshiro would bark, his gaze never wavering from his pupils. "Increase your nen flow and maintain it. Your goal is to extend the duration of the Ren." Finks would often break the intense silence with his light-hearted banter. "Hey, old man, are you trying to kill us?" he'd say, grinning despite the fatigue threatening to pull him under. Koshiro would shoot him a stern look, which would silence him momentarily. But it was a recurring pattern, Finks' easygoing nature clashing with the intensity of their training. During one such rigorous session, Canary spoke up. "Why do we have to keep doing this? Isn't controlling the flow enough?" she asked, her brow furrowed. Koshiro turned his gaze to her. "Ren isn't just about controlling your nen flow. It's about enduring the surge of your own power. The longer you can withstand your own nen, the stronger you become." His words resonated with the group. It was not just about commanding their nen, but about becoming a force capable of enduring its intensity. It was a struggle, a grueling battle between their will and their power. Finks groaned. "Easier said than done, old man." Phaeton snorted at his friend's complaint. "Stop whining, Finks. It's unbecoming." Meanwhile, Haruto remained silent, his focus entirely on his nen. The room echoed with the intensity of their focus, each of them locked in their own internal battle. Haruto's nen was a radiant flame, steadily growing under his command. The small boy had an undeniable presence, his natural kingly aura reflecting in his every action. 4. "Your training has only just begun," Koshiro stated, his stern gaze scanning his pupils. "Ren is the foundation upon which your strength will be built. The further you can push, the stronger you will become." Canary, Phaeton, and Finks exchanged glances, their determination renewed. Haruto remained silent, his resolve undeterred. "So, what's the time limit?" Phaeton asked, a spark of defiance in his eyes. As long as possible, Koshiro responded, the goal isn't a fixed time. It's to endure. To overcome. Their focus wavered as a messenger interrupted the intense session, handing Koshiro an envelope sealed with the emblem of the Meteor City Elder Council. As he tore open the seal and scanned the content, a deep frown creased his weathered face. His normally stern gaze softened, replaced with an unsettling solemnity. Finks, ever the curious one, was the first to break the silence. What's the matter, old man? Bad news? Koshiro sighed deeply, running his fingers through his silver hair. 3 years ago, he began, his voice low, a man from Meteor City was arrested for a murder he didn't commit in York New City. They didn't find any identification on him, and he was sentenced without proper defense. Phaeton's eyes hardened. Innocent? Yes, Koshiro nodded. They've just found the actual culprit, a drug addict whose past crimes were revealed after his recent arrest. It's too late for the innocent man. The training hall was filled with a tense silence. These kids knew about the world's cruelty, but hearing about a fellow city ruler's unjust fate stirred something within them. Haruto broke the silence. They did nothing to rectify their mistake? The world is unfair, young prince, Koshiro responded. This is one of many injustices faced by our people. Phaeton clenched his fists, anger surging through his veins. And we just accept that? No, Koshiro stated firmly. We learn from it. We grow stronger, so when the time comes, we can fight against such injustices. Finks, trying to lighten the atmosphere, nudged Phaeton. Hear that? Let's get stronger and beat the crap out of him. Canary, typically silent, voiced her thoughts. Strength isn't always enough, Finks. We need wisdom as well. Phaeton glanced at Haruto, then back at Koshiro. Then we keep training. Silence fell like a heavy curtain in the room as Haruto's words seeped into the atmosphere, his rage palpable and raw. His voice was a low hiss, yet it cut through the tension in the room like a blade. His fury, overwhelming and relentless, bore into them. Despite the Nen barriers they had erected, Haruto's aura pierced through, its strength shaking them to their very cores. No. Haruto's voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper, but the power behind it was deafening. We will send a message. Meteor is my city, and people inside are my subjects. No one falsely persecutes my people and gets away with it. His young face was twisted in an almost grotesque mask of fury. His violet eyes were lit with a chilling, unadulterated anger, an intensity that was terrifying. It was a sight that would instill fear in the hearts of the bravest warriors. Koshiro found himself momentarily tongue-struck. Despite his many years and experiences, the depth of Haruto's rage startled him. He had seen the boy angry before, but this was different. This was not the anger of a boy, but the rage of a king protecting his kingdom. Finks, usually the first to break silence, found himself stepping back. The force of Haruto's rage hit him like a punch to the gut. It was then he understood the full gravity of Haruto's words. They were not just students to him. They were his people. Phaeton's mouth twisted into a grimace. He was used to the king's commanding presence, yet he could not suppress the shudder that passed through him at Haruto's words. It was anger, yes, but also a declaration. A promise. Canary remained silent. The force of Haruto's aura was a storm she did not dare to contest. She sat quietly, her mind racing. She had never seen Haruto so fiercely protective before. It both scared and reassured her. She was loyal to Haruto. Whatever he wanted to do, she would do. A sense of solidarity sparked in the air, their shared indignation swirling with Haruto's fury. The silence that followed was charged with determination, each of them processing the implications of Haruto's words in their own way. Finks was the first to break the silence, his voice steadier than they expected. You heard the king, guys. Let's give 'em hell. Chapter 22. Phaeton's gaze hardened, his eyes flashing dangerously. We don't just train, we prepare for war. Koshiro, taken aback, took a moment to gather himself before addressing Haruto, his voice firm. Your anger is just, Haruto. and your resolve is admirable. But remember, vengeance and justice are not the same. We aim to rectify, not to destroy." The old man's words hung in the air, adding another layer to the tense atmosphere. They understood his wisdom, yet the sting of injustice was still fresh in their hearts. Haruto fixed Koshiro with a fierce stare. "Justice, then. But with a message. I want them to remember." Koshiro simply nodded, knowing better than to argue with the fiery prince when his resolve was set. Haruto's anger was a force to be reckoned with, but it was also a spark of motivation. They needed that fire now, more than ever. Canary, still silent, met Haruto's gaze. His intensity was almost mesmerizing, the fire in his eyes reflecting her own burning indignation. The injustice felt personal to her, a familiar echo of the discrimination they often faced. She nodded in agreement, her determination reflecting in her hardened expression. It didn't take long for the council to piece together the circumstances surrounding the brutal injustice. 31 individuals, a network of corruption, had conspired to frame the innocent Meteor City citizen, each one implicated in a vicious chain of events that had led to a man losing his life. Their anger matched Haruto's, a swirling tempest that threatened to erupt. A proposed act of terrorism was debated, an eye for an eye, the council argued. Each life that played a role in the wrongful conviction should be answered by a life from Meteor City. But hearing the reckless suggestion only served to stoke Haruto's anger. A sacrifice. His people? His lips curled into a snarl, his lilac eyes burning with outrage. Their audacity disgusted him, sitting in the comfort of their titles, contemplating the lives of his people as though they were mere pawns to be sacrificed at will. Koshiro was quick to intercept the spiraling situation. He halted the meeting, proclaiming he'd handle the matter himself. After all, he was in charge of managing the explosives. There was a murmur of approval from the council, and they exited the chamber, leaving Koshiro alone with Haruto. The old man's gaze found Haruto's. His youthful face was hardened, lips pressed into a thin line. There was a glint in his eye that was too old for his age. "Well, young prince?" he asked, his tone steady. "How do you propose we deal with this?" Haruto smirked, a mischievous yet terrifying grin spreading across his face. The mere sight sent a chill down Koshiro's spine. "We will not stoop to their level, Koshiro. The lives of our people are not tokens to be tossed in some perverse game," Haruto retorted, his voice resonating with authority. His gaze never wavered from the old man's. A low chuckle echoed through the chamber, originating from the shadows in the corner. Phaeton stepped into the dim light, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "A taste of their own medicine, then? I like where this is going," he hissed, his voice echoing with a latent threat. Finks shot Phaeton a sideways glance, one eyebrow raised in intrigue. "Sounds fun, but remember, we're not exactly skilled in the whole justice system thing." "True," Haruto nodded, "but we do have a certain set of skills." The next day, the world was in a state of shock. 31 people, all connected to the unjust trial and sentence of a man from Meteor City, were found dead in their own homes. Beat cops, the judge, the prosecutor, the defense, jury members, even key witnesses, all fell victim to an unknown assailant. The eerie thing was, no signs of a struggle or forced entry were discovered at any of the crime scenes. All the victims seemed to have died suddenly, unexpectedly, behind closed doors. As if death had quietly crept in, claimed them, and left without a trace. Beside each of the bodies, a chilling note was found: "We'll accept anything you leave here, but don't ever take anything away from us." It was a warning, a reminder, and a promise all rolled into one. As the news spread, chaos ensued, the authorities struggling to find any leads. Fear gripped the city of Yorknew. Whispers of a vengeful ghost from Meteor City circulated among the people, only amplifying the terror. Meanwhile, in the confines of Meteor City, Koshiro, Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, and Canary sat quietly, watching the news unfold. They exchanged glances, a dark satisfaction lingering among them. "Guess they received our message," Finks broke the silence, a wicked smirk on his face. Phaeton chuckled, his voice sounding cold and menacing. Not too subtle, but gets the point across. Subtlety was never our aim, Haruto said, his lilac eyes gleaming with an almost savage satisfaction. Indeed, Koshiro acknowledged, the corners of his mouth twitching in an almost smile. We needed to make an impression. Canary nodded in agreement, her expression impassive, but her eyes were alight with a sense of victory. The atmosphere was charged with a grim sense of satisfaction, a feeling of justice served, albeit in their unique, brutal way. The news continued to play out on the screen, reporters stammering over their words as they attempted to make sense of the senseless. And the world, Haruto murmured, his gaze focused on the flickering screen, will remember. The events that transpired in the following days only served to affirm Haruto's words. The authorities scrambled to find any leads, any hint of the assassins. But the victims were chosen carefully, methodically. No connection was made between the victims and their mysterious deaths, other than their connection to the wrongful conviction case. Public opinion was split. Many were terrified, unsettled by the mysterious and seemingly random deaths. Others saw it as divine retribution, justice finally served to those who had played a part in the wrongful execution of an innocent man. As the dust settled, one thing was clear, Meteor City had made its point. Their message was heard loud and clear. The council, and the world, would think twice before treating their people as expendable again. Canary, usually the silent one, voiced her thoughts. They are scared, she stated, watching the news. Good. Chapter 23. The harsh winds of Meteor City whipped through the training grounds, churning up dust and debris as the four young combatants squared off. Haruto, standing at the center of the makeshift arena, eyed his opponents with a calculating gaze. Phaeton, Canary, and Finks returned the stare, their stances mirroring their individual determination. They didn't have Hatsu yet, but they made up for it with pure tenacity. Stay out of each other's way, Haruto warned, his tone as cold as the wind sweeping across their faces. He maneuvered himself strategically, forcing the others to counteract each other's attacks rather than focus on him. This was a lesson they had learned the hard way. In a fight, every advantage counts, and Haruto was proving to be a master strategist. With a burst of nen energy, the training battle commenced. Phaeton was the first to strike, his speed astonishing, darting towards Haruto with an aggressiveness that belied his age. But Haruto was ready, shifting his position in a way that put Canary directly in Phaeton's path. Caught off guard, Canary stumbled back, muttering a curse under her breath. Finks seized the opportunity to move in on Haruto, but the young prodigy was already 3 steps ahead. Finks found himself lunging towards Canary instead, who narrowly avoided his incoming attack. Phaeton growled in annoyance, quickly adjusting his trajectory to prevent crashing into Canary. The 3 of them were soon locked in a chaotic frenzy of attacks, each narrowly avoiding the other's strike due to Haruto's meticulous orchestration. "Stop getting in my way!" Phaeton snarled at the others, his eyes flaring with anger. "Look who's talking!" Finks retorted, narrowly sidestepping a lunge from Phaeton. The next 3 years were a blur, filled with grueling training sessions that pushed their bodies to the limit. Koshiro taught them the basics of Nen, a foundational aspect of their power that was crucial to their survival. They learned to channel their life energy into physical strength, resilience, and speed. The training was relentless, pushing them to the brink of collapse each day. Yet, they persevered, each driven by their individual goals and the shared camaraderie that stemmed from their common circumstances. Haruto grew into his role as the group's tacit leader. His inherent majesty and ambition were evident in his every move. He led by example, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to their collective cause. Despite his youth, his authority was rarely questioned, commanding respect from his comrades. Phaeton, with his explosive temper and unyielding determination, proved himself to be a force to be reckoned with. His ruthlessness often sent shivers down the spines of his companions, but he was dependable in his own way. Finks, despite his inherent nonchalance, was ever reliable. His strength and resolve were rivaled only by his loyalty to his companions. He would go to the ends of the earth for them, a fact they all acknowledged and respected. Canary, the youngest of the group, held her own with remarkable tenacity. Quiet yet fierce, she adapted and learned with a speed that often left the others in awe. Despite her soft-spoken nature, she carried a strength that was impossible to ignore. "You always play the same hand, Phaeton," Haruto taunted, moving just enough to put Finks in the path of another of Phaeton's relentless attacks. "Unpredictability is a weapon too." "Damn it, Haruto," Finks snapped, blocking Phaeton's incoming blow. "Stop playing puppeteer." "I'd prefer not to be a puppet then," Canary called, her nimble movements a stark contrast to the brute force displayed by the boys. Haruto chuckled, a hint of condescension in his tone. "I control the battlefield. That's why I lead and you follow." Phaeton gritted his teeth but said nothing. He knew Haruto was right. For now. And that now was the motivation for Phaeton to push harder, train harder. Haruto's arrogance was his motivation. As the dust settled, their bodies drenched in sweat and their breaths heavy, Koshiro's words echoed in their minds. "Remember, power is earned, not given." The day of Hatsu creation finally arrived, bathed in the golden light of the morning sun. Koshiro, a weathered man of 67 winters, took his usual place across from Haruto, Phaeton, Finks, and Canary in the training yard. There was an anticipatory silence as Koshiro set before each of them a cup of water with a leaf floating atop its surface. Koshiro began to outline the 6 categories of Nen mastery. His voice, though gruff from age, carried an undeniable gravity as he explained. He spoke of enhancers, whose Nen alters the volume of the water. He talked of transmuters, who change the taste of the water with their aura. Emitters, he explained, change the color of the water, while conjurers cause impurities to appear in it. Manipulators, he described, can move the leaf without touching it, and then there were the specialists, who cause changes that fall outside the norm. Once the explanations were finished, it was time for the test. Canary went first, her aura seeping into the water, changing its taste subtly. A soft gasp left her lips as she processed the implications. She was transmuter. Next was Finks. As his aura mingled with the water, it caused the volume to increase slightly, revealing him as an enhancer. A smirk played on his lips, but he said nothing, merely stepping back to allow the next in line. Phaeton followed, his aura causing small impurities to appear in the water. A conjurer, his aura proclaimed him. He sneered at the water, kicking the cup away before moving aside with a huff of annoyance. Haruto was the last. The moment his aura touched the water, the leaf on top corroded instantly. A chill ran through the yard as the other leaves began to corrode as well, disintegrating as though they had been kissed by an invisible acid. The young boy remained unaffected, his gaze as icy as ever, merely watching the spectacle in silence. Chapter 24. The scene was familiar to them. Haruto's Nen was so potent that it often triggered involuntary reactions from the environment around him, especially when his mood shifted. His specialist type was unique, even among specialists. The corroding leaves were an ominous visual cue of his unique capabilities, a haunting reminder of the raw power he possessed. "Who would have guessed, eh?" Finks muttered, sidestepping the now wilted leaves around his feet. Phaeton only grunted in response, his sharp gaze fixed on Haruto, who stood in the midst of the corroded leaves, untouched and unmoved. Canary, however, remained silent, her eyes flitting between Haruto and the wilted leaves around him. But she didn't step away. She moved closer to Haruto, a silent declaration of unwavering loyalty, despite the manifest power that just showcased itself. "Today, we begin the process of developing your Hatsu," Koshiro announced. His words echoed in the yard, the only noise cutting through the tense silence. "Remember, a Hatsu is the reflection of oneself. It is an embodiment of who you are." He paced the length of the training yard, his gaze heavy on each of them. Enhancers, like you Finks, typically create Hatsus focused on reinforcing their natural abilities or objects. The attack can be straightforward but powerful. Finks just nodded, accepting the information without question. Transmuters often create hatsus that involve transforming their aura into a substance or property they can manipulate, Koshiro continued, turning his gaze onto Canary. Like altering the properties of your net to be sharp, hot, or even sticky. Canary gave a quiet nod, her eyes serious as she absorbed the information. Conjurers, such as you, Phaeton, Koshiro said, leveling his gaze at the young boy, create hatsus that involve conjuring objects with their aura. These can range from simple physical objects to complex mechanisms, even mimicking special abilities. Phaeton met his gaze and shrugged. It wasn't a dismissive gesture, but more of an acknowledgement of his words. Koshiro turned to Haruto last, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Specialists. They are unpredictable. They tend to develop unique abilities that do not fall into the other categories. Their hatsus can range from manipulating others to precognition. Only time will tell, Haruto. Haruto nodded, his expression unreadable. The yard fell into a contemplative silence as each of them considered their possible hatsus, the possibilities as limitless as their imaginations. A sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air as Koshiro began to outline how their nen types corresponded to varying levels of proficiency in manipulating their aura. Remember, he began, his voice steady despite his advanced age, while each type has the most proficiency in their main category, this proficiency lessens as it moves across the types. Like water trickling from its source, it loses its intensity as it moves further away. He picked up a stick from the ground, sketching a circle in the dust, and divided it into sections. Each section bore a name representing the different nen types. He pointed towards the enhancer section and traced a line to the neighboring types, transmuter and emitter. An enhancer like you, Sphinx, has 80% proficiency in emission and transmutation. However, it drops to 60% in manipulation and conjuration. Moving his stick, he pointed towards the transmuter section next, and the process was repeated. Canary, as a transmuter, you will have similar proficiency in manipulation and enhancement, with a lower affinity for emission and conjuration. Phaeton listened attentively, as Koshiro traced a similar pattern for him, focusing on the conjuration part of the circle. Being a conjurer, Phaeton, you share the same affinity with Canary, but in a different order, of course. And now for you, Haruto. Koshiro turned towards the silent boy, his voice carrying an undercurrent of curiosity. Specialization is different. It's an anomaly within the nen system. Specialists possess abilities that do not fall into the 5 other categories and cannot be replicated, regardless of how close one may be to this category. You could say, it's exclusive in its truest sense. The old man paused, a soft chuckle escaping his lips, just like the people who possess it. Unpredictable and unique. Haruto remained unmoving, a thin eyebrow arching in response to Koshiro's statement. His silence seemed to amplify his aura of authority, drawing the unwavering attention of the others. The dust of the training grounds twisted into small cyclones as a gust of wind blew through the yard. Haruto's gaze flickered over the area, his mind undoubtedly churning with possibilities. A brief silence followed, only broken by the rustling of corroded leaves under Koshiro's feet as he moved back to his original position, signaling the end of the day's session. Remember, he warned as he started to leave, your hatsu is not just a mere technique, but a reflection of your very soul. Choose wisely. Canary was the first to move after the aged man had left. She moved closer to Haruto, her footsteps as silent as the breeze that danced around them. Her actions, though simple, were filled with a resolve stronger than any words could convey. Sphinx, not to be left out, stepped up as well, his eyes meeting Haruto's, acknowledging him in a silent agreement. His actions were less delicate than Canary's, yet they carried the same message. Phaeton remained where he was, his hands clenched at his sides. His eyes never left Haruto, a fierce flame burning within them. He wasn't one for open expressions, yet the silence he maintained spoke louder than words. With that, the 4 dispersed, each disappearing into their own corners of the compound, deep in thought about their potential hatsus. The next few weeks were a storm of brainstorming and trial and error, their daily schedules packed with rigorous training and constant practice. The yard resonated with the sound of focused grunts and the occasional outburst, a testament to the intense dedication each carried. Hatsu creation was a daunting task, not something achieved in a fleeting moment of inspiration. The process was painstakingly slow, requiring patience and rigorous attention to detail. While the young students were wrestling with their newfound abilities, Koshiro began teaching them more advanced applications of Nen. One of the first techniques was Gyo, a method of concentrating a larger than normal portion of Nen into a particular body part. Haruto, ever the strategist, found this technique particularly useful. It allowed him to sense hidden movements, enhancing his tactical acuity on the battlefield. In was another crucial application, an advanced form of Zetsu, allowing them to hide their aura from others while still being able to use it. It was here that Canary's natural stealth came into play. Her abilities, already impressive, were significantly augmented by In, making her an even more formidable opponent. The use of Ken was introduced to them as a means to defend against enemy attacks. Essentially a defensive application of Zetsu, Ken allowed the user to extend their aura evenly across their body, serving as a shield. Finks, with his sturdy build and unyielding resolve, was a natural at this, his aura's protective capacity seeming almost impenetrable. Ryu, the technique of fluidly shifting Nen proportions in different body parts, was something Phaeton, despite his volatile temper, took to with surprising grace. His fluid, unpredictable movements made him an even more challenging adversary, the added dimension of Ryu enhancing his natural agility. Shu was another technique they learned, an extension of Ten, allowing the user to extend their aura over objects to use them more effectively. Haruto took a particular interest in this technique, seeing potential beyond the immediate. He often tested this application on mundane objects, exploring the possible strategies he could incorporate with such a technique. Finally, they were taught Ko, a deadly application of Zetsu involving the concentration of all the user's aura into one particular body part. Though dangerous due to the exposure it caused, the damage it could inflict was considerable. This technique had a raw, brutal appeal that Phaeton was drawn to. The inherent risk was part of the allure for him. Chapter 25. A few months had slipped away, and the unusual quartet found themselves wandering the chaotic alleyways of Meteor City, the place they've known as home since they came into existence. As they sauntered, they came upon a peculiar scene, two teens, one a towering brute, the other a swift swordsman, clashing with each other in the middle of the streets. The brawny teen was a mass of raw strength and aggression even in his younger years. He stood tall, his body already swelling with power and sculpted by the harsh living conditions in Meteor City. His eyes glowed with primal instinct, hair wild and unkempt. Each punch he threw sent shockwaves through the surrounding buildings, making the children scatter in fear. The swordsman, on the other hand, moved with grace and a lethal elegance, slicing the air with his blade. But the damage of their battle was visible, the ruins of their fight scattering around the streets, terrifying the innocent bystanders. Haruto watched the scene, his violet eyes narrowing, taking in the damage they were inflicting. His gaze shifted to the children, their wide eyes filled with horror and fear. A cold rage filled him. This was his city, his home, his people. He may not care for individuals, but the thought of his city being tarnished, his people living in fear, was unacceptable. His voice echoed through the alleyway, steely and commanding, "Finks, Phaeton, enough." His eyes didn't leave the spectacle, his gaze challenging and unyielding. Finks, the muscular youth beside Haruto, exchanged a quick glance with the sharp-eyed Phaeton, both reading the silent command in Haruto's stare. They rushed towards the fighting teens, not wasting a breath, their actions mirroring their respect and acknowledgement of Haruto's silent orders. Canary, the smallest amongst them, stood beside Haruto, her small fists clenched tightly. She watched as Finks and Phaeton attempted to intercept the brawling teens. She wasn't afraid, not for herself, but for Haruto. She would do anything to protect him, a fierce loyalty that was as unyielding as the concrete they stood on. The muscle-bound teen, Yuvagen, roared as he threw another punch at Nobunaga, who responded by swiftly maneuvering his blade. As the fist connected with the sword, Finks stepped in, catching Yuvagin's punch effortlessly. The brute of a teen stared, surprised by the sudden interference. "Hey, what's the big idea?" Yuvagin demanded, trying to wrench his hand free from Finks's grasp. But Finks stood unyielding, a solid wall, his gaze steady and calm, and for the first time, Yuvagin felt a twinge of uncertainty. Phaeton, on the other hand, had his own opponent to deal with. The swift swordsman, Nobunaga, was about to swing his blade once more when Phaeton, lightning quick, snatched the weapon from his grasp. The blade was trapped between two of Phaeton's fingers, still as a statue, the swordsman's eyes widening in shock. "You guys need to cool down," Finks stated, his voice steady, his eyes not once leaving Yuvagin's heated gaze. Phaeton merely glanced at the swordsman, a smirk playing on his lips. "Don't you have anything better to do?" The challenge in Phaeton's tone sparked something within the two teens, their frustration escalating into a raw display of power. Suddenly, the air around Yuvagin and Nobunaga rippled with an unseen force, a pressure that filled the air and swept over the alleyways. The sensation was unworldly, strange, as if they had awakened something within themselves, an energy, Nen. Seeing the impending escalation, Haruto's violet eyes narrowed further as he stepped forward, exuding an overwhelming aura that made the air quiver around him. Canary followed him, her determined gaze fixed on Haruto's back. She too was unyielding, her nen rippling like an invisible cloak around her. Despite her small stature, her presence was as formidable as that of her companions. The nen flowing from Haruto was immense and intimidating, a relentless surge that felt like the rising tide before a devastating storm. Yuvagin and Nobunaga faltered in their postures, their anger momentarily giving way to apprehension. However, both were headstrong, not willing to yield. Gritting their teeth, they turned their full attention to Haruto, their eyes flashing dangerously. Haruto's gaze remained steady. "Finks, Phaeton," his voice was calm but carried an undeniable authority, "fall back. Protect the perimeter from the aftershock." With a silent nod, the two retreated, Finks leaving Yuvagin's punch hanging mid-air and Phaeton releasing Nobunaga's sword, leaving the two teens to face Haruto alone. The air grew tense as Haruto strode towards the duo. With each step, the tension tightened like a bowstring drawn to its limit. The anticipation was palpable. Haruto stood between Yuvagin and Nobunaga, his violet gaze unblinking, a silent challenge. His aura, like a shield of unbreakable steel, exerted its influence, making the two teens feel as though they were mere minnows in the face of an encroaching tempest. Yuvagin roared, his fist cutting through the air with a force that could shatter concrete. Nobunaga moved simultaneously, his sword arcing in a swift, deadly trajectory towards Haruto. Yet, Haruto seemed unfazed. Like a dancer navigating through a storm, he stepped gracefully around their attacks, his movements exuding a deadly elegance. Each move he made was a step ahead, predicting their next attack before they even made it. Nobunaga, in desperation, swung a mighty slash towards Haruto, only for him to sidestep effortlessly. The swordsman's attack hit nothing but air, his blade slicing through empty space, while Haruto remained untouched. Yuvagin, equally desperate, lunged forward, attempting to land the punch. His fist sailed through the air, straight towards Haruto, who merely raised a hand, stopping Yuvagin's punch mid-air, the shock of the stop sending tremors through Yuvagin's arm. Out of desperation, Yuvagin let out a roar, a sound blast that surged forward like a tidal wave. It was potent, strong enough to level the surrounding buildings and harm the bystanders who were frozen in fear. But Haruto was faster. "Silence," he commanded, a single word carrying the weight of his fury. The sound wave hit an invisible wall, absorbed into nothingness. Yuvagin choked, his roar cut short, the silence hanging heavy in the air.